Hey guys, tonight we take a slow walk through the arched corridors of Isfahan's Grand Bazaar. The stone under your feet is worn smooth from centuries of sleepy merchants, early morning buyers and silk slippers gliding silently across its surface. You move past crates of dried figs, pomegranates splitting at their seams, and stalls stacked high with copper pots that catch the first orange light like tiny suns. It smells faintly of cardamom, sawdust, and something you can only describe as spilled thyme. The air is still cool from the night, though it carries the promise of midday heat. Above you, the vaulted ceiling filters in slivers of morning through patterned holes punched in ancient bricks. Tiny constellations blinking in reverse. You are not in a rush, you never are. Because you, of all people, have one of the most gloriously boring jobs on the planet. You inspect Persian carpets for a living, not sell them, not weave them, not roll them out for ogling tourists. No, you are the person whose sole duty is to crawl around on dusty knees, squint at thread tension, and debate whether the weft is moody. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I like to imagine this story stretching across continents, like a carpet unrolling across the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You move deeper into the bazaar where shopkeepers are only just pulling up their awnings. One yawns so wide you can count his molars. Another sips tea like it's a sacred ritual, and honestly, in this part of the world, it is. A sleepy cat, sprawled across 3 bolts of velvet, flicks one ear at you but otherwise does not acknowledge your existence. Typical, your path is familiar, winding past the spice cellars, the tiny silversmithing workshop where no one ever looks up, and the heavy green door tucked into the side of the tiled archway. The door leads to your destination, the inspection house. No sign, no pomp, just a rusted handle and a creak that hasn't changed since the 17th century. You know because it features prominently in a journal written by your job's earliest known predecessor. He described it as the sound of history clearing its throat. Inside, everything is quiet, and not just the kind of quiet where people happen to be silent. No, this is the cultivated, prized, aggressively defended silence of people who have decided that peace is productivity. You remove your shoes, another quiet tradition, and step into soft, worn slippers lined with sheared wool. They were likely crafted by someone who understands the precise ratio of toe puff to heel sink. You don't question it. They feel like memory foam made out of nostalgia. The floors are wide, unpolished wood, covered in layered carpets, so old they've gone past elegance into some kind of sacred thread retirement. You walk gently over them, as if they might complain. Some probably would. Your workstation is a wide, low bench, padded with folded wool. You settle in, cross-legged, next to your tools. A small mirror on a stick, a brush made of horsehair, a slim copper hook for counting knots, and your battered notebook. You've had it so long the cover smells like sun-heated leather and old fig paste. Today's first assignment, a modest 8x11 kilim rug with an oddly lopsided central medallion. It looks innocent enough. But then so did that one from Shiraz that turned out to be 2 rugs sewn together with catgut. That day was not boring. You still have the scar on your knee from leaping backward into a tea tray. You roll out the kilim with a soft flourish. It unfolds like a story that's been waiting centuries to be told. You lean in close. The threads are faded but not bleached. Sun-aged naturally, not chemically mistreated. Good sign. The dye bleeds ever so slightly at the edges of the saffron yellow stripes, but that might just mean it was dyed during a humid spring. You jot that down. Humidity shifts the mood of a rug. Not many people know that. As you examine the weft tension near the bottom edge, a tiny green thread catches your attention. It shouldn't be there, doesn't match the color story, and yet it's the exact shade of a copper oxidized coin green, rare, Rare and intentional, you think. Not a mistake. Possibly a signature flourish from a village weaver who wanted to leave her mark without breaking tradition. You scribble a question mark in your notebook, then draw a tiny green star beside it, your shorthand for maybe genius, maybe lunatic. Outside, the marketplace is coming to life, but inside the inspection house, time has folded in on itself. You're in a cocoon of dust motes, wool scent, and the slow ticking sound of a moth trap clicking shut somewhere in the rafters. Someone across the room sneezes quietly into their elbow. A very polite sneeze. You glance up. It's old Miran, the senior inspector, whose eyebrows seem to grow longer every week. He nods at you. The nod says, "Not bad for a Monday." You nod back. Yours says, "Found green again." Mehran raises one eyebrow. You know he'll ask you later. Over tea, when the world softens and debates over indigo sauces feel less like arguments and more like bedtime lullabies, you reach for your copper hook and begin the counting. 72 knots per horizontal inch. Not bad. You do a quick calculation, about 90,000 knots overall. That's a lot of patience from someone somewhere, probably sitting on a mud floor with a loom in her lap and a baby strapped to her back. You pause. There's something wonderful and ridiculous about the fact that your entire profession exists just to make sure that kind of labor didn't go to waste. You lean in closer, the world narrowing to silk, wool, and color. You lose track of time, your breath slowing, your fingers working by muscle memory. The medallion pattern is wonky, yes, but maybe purposefully so. In some traditions, imperfections were left deliberately so only God would be perfect. Other times, someone just had a migraine. Historians still argue whether those deliberate flaws were really spiritual or just excuses made by sleepy weavers. You don't weigh in. You're too busy staring at a purple flower that wasn't supposed to be purple at all. The flower you're inspecting isn't really purple, not royal purple anyway. It's the color of a bruised plum left in the sun too long. Not a bad shade, just unexpected. And you suspect that's precisely the problem. This particular design, a stylized tulip pattern common in carpets from the Kashan region, is traditionally dyed in shades of deep rose or rusted crimson, not plum. You narrow your eyes, maybe the dyer ran out of madder root and panicked. Or maybe someone substituted a batch of stale pomegranate rind and hoped nobody would notice. Well, someone did. You. You mark it in your notebook with a short, smug tick. Not in judgment, mind you. You're not here to condemn. You're here to observe, report, and gently annoy your colleagues with the thrill of small discoveries. You rise from your bench and stretch. Your spine cracks like an old lacquered scroll being unfurled. Around you, the inspection house hums quietly with the frictionless rhythm of deep focus. The light filtering through the high windows is soft now, bent gold and suspended dust, and a few inspectors are already stirring from their carpet-induced trances to begin the morning tea ritual. You follow them to the samovar which stands in the corner like a chrome deity, hissing benevolently. You select the chipped ceramic cup you always use, the one with the faded blue glaze and a hairline crack that somehow never widens. There's a legend that it belonged to an inspector who once rejected a rug from the Shah himself. No one knows if that's true, but the cup gets you decent pause and that's all that matters. The tea's hot enough to burn memory into your mouth. You cradle it carefully, inhaling its steam as if it contains answers, which in a way it does. The tannins slow your pulse. The cardamom lifts the corners of your mind. You sip. The day stretches before you like the border fringe of a 14-foot carpet, narrow, intricate, and occasionally knotted in places you didn't expect. Returning to your station, you find that someone has left a folded rug segment beside your tools. No note. Just the edge of a dark blue panel peeking from under a linen wrap. Ah, a mystery delivery. You unwrap it gently, revealing a section of wool so densely knotted you can't see the base threads at all. The design is a garden scene, trees with curling branches, birds perched mid-chirp, and a stone fountain frozen mid-drip. The entire scene is rendered in miniature, like someone had been painting with thread instead of brushes. You run your fingers across it slowly, eyes scanning for irregularities. None at first. Then you see it. One of the birds is upside down, not drastically, not comically, just wrong. As if it had spun in place halfway through weaving and nobody corrected it. You smile, a soft one. This, is the sort of mistake that tells a story. Either the weaver was distracted, maybe a baby cried, maybe lightning hit the neighbor's goat, or it was intentional. Some claim these kinds of quirks served as secret messages, indicators of personal sorrow or political allegiance or love. Historians still argue whether those so-called messages are real or just romantic nonsense. But you like to believe in them. In the quiet rebellion of a bird turned the wrong way. Someone clears their throat behind you. It's Anoush, the youngest inspector here, still too enthusiastic about thread density and far too attached to his new measuring calipers. He looks at the bird, then at you. "Do you think it was symbolic?" he whispers, as though speaking louder might wake the bird. "Or drunk," you reply, sipping your tea. Could go either way. He scribbles something down furiously, then scurries off, probably to write a paper about upside-down avian motifs and their link to anti-tax sentiment during the Qajar dynasty. You wish him luck. You return to your own kilim. Now that your eyes are refreshed, you notice something else, a small loop of thread sticking up from the weave like an eyelash. That, your friend, is a cardinal sin. Looping thread is an open invitation to moths, mice, and the slow unraveling of centuries. You reach for your horsehair brush and gently coax the thread back into place. It's a precise movement, equal parts tenderness and scolding, like tucking a child into bed and reminding them not to drool on the pillow. As you work, you remember your first month here. You were clumsy, impatient, always tugging when you should have pressed. Mehran would walk past and mutter, "Gentler, always gentler, even when it's wrong." You didn't get it then. Now you do. Every mistake in a rug is already old. You're not correcting the weaver, you're speaking with them. Quietly, gently. Another inspector passes by with a rolled carpet under one arm and a look of profound exhaustion on his face. "This one smells like bad marriages," he murmurs, disappearing down the corridor. You nod in solidarity. Some rugs really do hold on to the arguments they witnessed. You roll your shoulders again, adjust your slippers, and lean into the next section. It's just a corner motif, a series of curling vines meant to evoke paradise. You trace the line of the vine with your fingertip and notice something peculiar. One of the leaves is a pomegranate, not a grape, not a huge deal, but symbolically it's loaded. In carpet symbolism, grapes represent abundance and eternity. Pomegranates, on the other hand, are all about fertility, blood, and the cycles of life. They show up more in funeral shrouds than in picnic-themed rugs. So why the swap? A mistake? Maybe. Or a choice made in grief. Or a commission by someone who wanted to say goodbye. You scribble a note in your book and sit back. The room is warm now, filled with the rustle of parchment, the occasional clink of tools, and the low murmur of two inspectors arguing about not counting methods. It's a soft environment, a slow one, but somehow satisfying. Because the truth is, your job isn't just about rugs. It's about memory, about noticing the details that others don't, about understanding that a crooked stitch or a bold pomegranate leaf might be the only thing someone dared to say aloud. The tea is cold now, but you don't mind. You finish the last sip, then rise to fetch your next project. Your slippers sigh against the wood as you walk, and, somewhere above, a pigeon coos from the rooftop. Like it, too, is part of the inspection team. The next rug is heavier, you can tell even before touching it, just from the indent in the wool mat where someone set it down. This one's thick, likely a double weft. You ease yourself to the floor and gently unwrap it, layer by layer, until the edge reveals a deep brick-red border so intense it practically hums. You lift the top edge, and it unfurls like a wave, slow, quiet, dense with old breath. It's a herris, you're certain of it. The geometry gives it away, stiff, bold medallions like stylized suns and sharp-angled leaves that look more like lightning bolts. Herries rugs never whisper. They march. Probably because they were knotted by people who didn't have time for curlicues. They had winters to prepare for. You lean in, letting your fingers press against the thick, stiff wool. This is mountain wool. You can smell it. Slightly oily. The sheep it came from likely grazed on wild mountain herbs and insulted their herders, and that's the kind of spirit you feel in Herries carpets. Your copper hook clicks as you measure the knot count. 48 knots per square inch. Not high, but Herries weavers never chased delicacy. They wove for durability. These were rugs meant to be stomped on by muddy boots and still last long enough to see great-grandchildren get into arguments about inheritance. You notice something strange along the bottom fringe, a knot pulled so tight it's discoloured, the wool slightly frayed. A sign of haste, or maybe tension in the weaver's life. You tilt your head. Historians still argue whether such signs indicate an apprentice rushing to meet a quota, or a master intentionally pulling tension to achieve a desired warp curve. Either way, it tells you something. Someone's hands lingered here longer than they intended. You take a long breath through your nose. The rug smells like cedar. Someone stored it well. But there's something else, a faint top note you can't quite place. A little musty, maybe floral, not perfume, too old, possibly dried rose petals. No, closer to marigold. You file that under intriguing but probably meaningless, which is a surprisingly large category in your notebook. Midway through your inspection, an older inspector walks by and grunts softly. He stops just long enough to mutter, "Ah, red like a temper and stiff as my knees." He chuckles at his own joke, then shuffles away, leaving a faint trail of cinnamon-scented lint behind him. You smile and return to your task. One of the medallions catches your attention, not because of its symmetry, but because of its asymmetry. It's slightly off-center, barely, but enough that it shifts the entire visual weight of the rug. Now, most people wouldn't notice this, but you were trained to spot misplaced gods in cloud patterns. You take a ruler and measure. Sure enough, the center medallion is 2 centimeters off to the left. Intentional, perhaps. Or maybe the loom shifted during a festival day and no one wanted to realign it. You lean back and sigh, feeling the creak of your knees echoing that old inspector's earlier joke. Carpets, like people, settle in odd ways over time. Just then, a young apprentice named Farid tiptoes up beside you. He's holding a small tray with a steaming cup of fresh tea and a folded cloth. He doesn't say a word. Apprentices are trained in silence first, knowledge second. You nod your thanks and he scurries away, no doubt to brush dust off some ancient runner full of thumbtack holes. You sip the tea, grateful for the heat. This batch has a clove in it. Spicy, unexpected, just like that one Herat rug you found last spring with the tiny, dancing camel motif hidden in the border. No one ever claimed it. You suspect it was a private joke or a protest. Possibly both. As you return to the inspection, you let your mind wander a little. You think about the weaver, whoever they were. Probably a woman seated cross-legged for months, her fingers moving without patterns, just memory. Maybe she hummed while she worked. Maybe she argued with her sister over thread dyeing. Maybe the house cat sat on the loom and refused to leave until she knotted a pattern around it. You inspect one more corner. This one has a small floral detail, the outline just slightly blurred. The weaver pressed too hard here. You can almost feel the thread bristling at you. It's minor, barely worth noting, but still you note it. Sometimes the rug tells you things no one else hears. And then you find the oddest part. Near the edge, stitched in faint brown thread, are 3C. Are 3 characters. Barely there. A signature? Possibly. But not in any script you recognize. You fetch a magnifying lens from your pouch and crouch low. The characters resemble Arabic, but with odd flourishes, not Farsi, not Ottoman Turkish either. A cipher, perhaps, or a weaver's mark meant to look like writing. Historians still argue whether these sorts of marks were the start of artisan branding or simply scribbles. You make a note, sketch the symbol in your book, and place a thin piece of parchment over it for protection. Someone behind you sneezes again, probably Mehran. That sneeze has a pattern now, once every 2 hours, right on schedule. You've never asked him if he times it on purpose. You suspect he does. You finish your inspection, carefully re-rolling the rug, aligning the fringe like someone folding linens at a monastery. You return it to the rack and mark it in the log. Herries, strong weave, off-center medallion, possible cipher marking. You give it a smiley face. No one else will see it. It's just for you. And then, slippers whispering across the old wood, you go to retrieve the next project. The next carpet is thinner, lighter, and smells faintly of rosewater, though that could just be lingering perfume from whoever wrapped it. It's stored in an older-style roll, tied at both ends with indigo-dyed ribbon, like a forgotten birthday present from someone who still believes in sending handwritten letters. You lift it gently. Your fingers know right away, this is silk. You lower it to your inspection bench with care, more ceremony than necessity perhaps, but silk rugs demand a particular kind of reverence. They don't just lie flat, they recline like old nobles in embroidered robes. You untie the ribbon, tug softly at one end, and let the weave unravel onto the wool mat like a silver tongue rolling out secrets. Immediately the threads shimmer, catching what little morning light is left through the dusty upper windows. Not all silk is created equal. Some comes from worms fed on mulberry leaves in cool, dry climates. Others? Well, some worms eat whatever they're handed, and the result is a dull, frizz-prone thread that wrinkles at the first sign of a gaze. But this is good silk. Thin, strong, soft enough to make you feel guilty just brushing it with your knuckle. You lean in. A garden scene again, but this time not the stylized symmetry of Heriz. This is finer, more deliberate. The trees bend as if to kiss the fountain. Birds flutter above roses, their wings etched in knots no bigger than sesame seeds. The colors are soft, sun-faded saffron, watery turquoise, charcoal so light it flirts with lavender. You exhale slowly. A silk rug like this is the product of months of meticulous knotting, often done in pairs, with two weavers side by side, reciting the pattern aloud like a prayer. Your copper hook hovers just above the surface. You don't use it yet. You just look. The border, unusually, is incomplete on one edge. You tilt your head. Unfinished? No, this was intentional. Some master weavers would leave one section incomplete as a spiritual statement. Only God creates perfection. Others just ran out of thread and knew no one would notice. You reach for your mirror on a stick and slide it gently under the rug, checking the knot structure from beneath. Everything's tight but not choked. A good sign. Poor quality silk knots tend to clump or break when tested, but this one holds. No resistance, just quiet strength. You pause to write in your notebook. Garden silk near flawless. Incomplete border, possibly devotional omission or clever corner cutting. Then you underline the word possibly 3 times. Interpretive humility is part of the job. Behind you, you hear the sound of distant arguing, muffled, polite. That'll be the dye men again, no doubt disputing the source of a particular blue used in a corn runner that came in last week. One swears it's indigo, the other says it's ground azurite. Frankly, they could both be wrong. You've seen cobalt mixed with goat urine do things no chemistry book accounts for. Historians still argue whether some of these tones, especially the night sky blues from 17th century Yazd, came from domestic recipes or smuggled Venetian pigments. Either way, the result is always the same, you staring into blue so deep it feels like it might swallow you whole. Returning to the rug, you notice something odd in the garden scene, a tiny figure, barely more than a shadow, stitched into the corner. It's human-shaped, but with no facial detail. Just a curve of the back, seated cross-legged beneath a tree. Now that's unusual. Figures in Persian rugs are rare, especially ones meant for display. In older centuries, figural representations were considered inappropriate by more conservative patrons. But here one is, and he or she looks weary. You bend closer. The figure holds a book, or something like a book, one hand outstretched toward the rose bush. You trace the stitching with your fingertip, careful not to tug. You can't help but smile. It's as if someone wove themselves into the fabric, literally. You note it in your book, underlined twice. Seated figure in garden, no detail, possibly autobiographical. You sit back and sip your tea, now lukewarm. A moth trap clicks shut above you again, this time followed by a faint flutter. The war continues. Farid appears beside you again, holding a new piece of parchment. You take it and unfold it. It's a sketch. A motif he saw on a carpet fragment from earlier, drawn in charcoal. It's a tulip, but twisted. The petals curve unnaturally inward, like they're listening. You raise an eyebrow. Where was this? Behind the ledger cupboard, he whispers. Stuck in a basket. You nod slowly. Check the archives, might belong to the Kerman fragment collection. He nods and vanishes again. You like that kid. Quiet, curious, mildly haunted, the perfect apprentice. You return to the silk rug, running your hand gently across its surface. It's warm now, as if it's absorbed all the morning's patience. You roll it slowly, edge over edge, tucking it back into its linen wrap and resealing it with the ribbon. You write a short summary and slip it into the accompanying pouch. Silk garden, seated figure, devotional omission, possible Safavid court origin, recommend preservation at medium humidity. You rise and stretch again. That deep carpet bench ache is back in your thighs. Someone nearby opens a window, letting in the faint sound of distant donkey carts and the sharper call of a pomegranate seller. The air shifts. It smells like sunlight on bricks. Another carpet is waiting, folded, not rolled. That usually means it came in folded, which is wrong. You sigh, already bracing for creases, but that's later. For now, you walk to the corner, refill your tea, and pause to look at the walls. They're covered in scrollwork calligraphy and small framed photos of past inspectors, faces mostly forgotten, though some still haunt dreams after long inspections. You touch the edge of one photo. Old Bahram, who once swore he could smell different centuries in wool. You laughed at him then. Now, you're not so sure. You sit back down, slippers curling against your mat, and exhale. Another silk rug told its story, quietly, stubbornly, fully. The folded carpet sits alone, like a sulking guest at a party. You eye it with mild suspicion. Folding is an insult to rugs, creases that can bruise the fibres, stress the weft, and crush knots into sullen clumps. Whoever brought it in either didn't know better or didn't care. Either way, you will now spend the better part of your morning coaxing it back into dignity. You kneel and ease the folds apart. The rug doesn't resist, but it certainly doesn't cooperate. The fabric is stiff where it shouldn't be, the edges curling like a cat that's been woken too early. It's wool, clearly, but not local, too coarse, too scratchy. Possibly goat blend or camel. You run your fingers over it gently, hoping for clarity. The design is odd, large, heavy floral motifs, but all in brown and beige, with barely a hint of colour. Stark, monochromatic, and, dare you say it, moody. You've seen this style before. These are tribal motifs from the southern fringes of Persia, possibly the Kashki people, not woven for showrooms but for tents. These rugs were made to be used, slept on, rained on, sat upon by generations eating from one pot of rice and lamb. The border is uneven, not sloppily so, but definitely hand-determined, and the central motif, yes, there it is a diamond surrounded by 4 almond-shaped eyes. Protection symbols. You nod. You've seen versions of this before, woven by women who didn't read or write but told stories through stitches. You reach for your copper hook and begin measuring, 30 knots per inch, give or take. Low resolution, but precise in intention. You can see how the rhythm of the knots speeds up in places, slows in others. That tells you when the weaver's fingers were tired. or when someone interrupted, or when the stew boiled over and she had to rush back. You take a sip of fresh tea. It's hotter than you expect. Someone must have just changed the samovar again. You mutter a soft thanks to whoever's on tea duty today. It's a sacred trust in the inspection house, second only to not sitting on the good rugs. The rug creaks faintly under your hands as it flattens, as though reluctant to reveal its whole story. But you're patient. You lay linen weights at each corner and let gravity do its slow work. While it settles, you examine the fringe. Here's where the quirks often live. This one's short, cropped too close, possibly trimmed after arrival. That's unfortunate. Sometimes the end knots hold regional signatures like punctuation marks. Without them, attribution becomes guesswork. You sigh and note, fringe cropped, attribution more difficult. Still, the wool tells you things. The color variation, almost like wood grain, suggests hand dyeing with inconsistent heat. Could be onion skins, could be walnut husks. You once met a dyer who used crushed pistachio shells for pale green. His hands were always stained like spring leaves. Historians still argue whether certain tribal groups used specific dye recipes passed down orally or simply improvised with whatever they could forage. In truth, it was likely both. You can almost hear the argument now, Mehran insisting on a codified palette, while the dye specialist swears on his mother's grave that improvisation was the mother tongue of every decent weaver. You glance up. Across the room, someone is inspecting a rolled Bakhtiari panel with such intensity it looks like they're reading war poetry. A young woman, new, maybe 3 months in. She hasn't learned yet that rugs don't yield to staring. They open, slowly, with touch, with breath, with patience. Back at your bench, the creases in the Qashqai rug are beginning to ease. You press the brush over one stubborn fold, releasing a faint puff of dust. It smells of straw and oil. Not unpleasant, just old, like someone's grandmother's attic. Your brush catches on something, a thread that doesn't belong. You pluck it free. Red, bright red. Synthetic, maybe. Or from a patch job. You lean in and spot a tiny repair near the bottom left edge. A barely visible square, no bigger than your thumb, where the weave changes ever so slightly. A fix. You smile. Repairs like this are love letters. Someone cared enough to mend the rug instead of discarding it. It means this piece meant something. It travelled. It endured. You write, one patch repair, synthetic thread, evidence of field use. You reach the central medallion again. The lines are imperfect, charmingly so. One corner droops slightly. Perhaps the weaver adjusted the loom mid-project, or her child tugged at her sleeve too often that day. You imagine the moment, the sun dipping low, wind stirring the tent flap, the weaver sighing and muttering to herself, close enough. And it was. It always is. You take another long breath, let the silence stretch. In the quiet, you swear the rug exhales too. You rest your hands on it one final time, then slowly roll it back into shape, this time properly, with a wool core to prevent creases, tied at the ends with a soft cotton ribbon. No insult this time. In your ledger, you write, Qashqai tribal, low knot count, restored panel, monochrome floral, probable nomadic origin, recommend climate-neutral storage. You close your notebook with a soft thump. Someone nearby sneezes. That's 3 for Mehran today. He's on a roll. You walk to the window and glance out. The bazaar is in full swing now, carts creaking, merchants bickering politely, a boy chasing a chicken that absolutely does not want to be caught. It's all colour and motion out there, but in here, it's the opposite. It's stillness, detail, time behaving like molasses. You refill your tea and return to your bench. Another rug awaits, a tightly rolled piece wrapped in silk cloth. That means it's either very expensive or someone's wedding gift from 300 years ago. Either way, it'll need your attention. But for now, you sit, quiet, patient, wrapped in the scent of wool, rosewater, and old stories. You lift the silk-wrapped roll with both hands, careful not to compress the edges. It's heavier than it looks, and that tells you 2 things immediately. It's high knot density and likely woven with silk and wool in combination. That's the good stuff. You settle it onto the padded bench and take a moment, just a moment, to enjoy the feeling of holding a rug that probably took 2 years to make and was never, not once, stepped on. This kind of preservation usually points to one thing: a commission, a rug made for ceremony or show, gifted at a marriage or hung in a noble's reception room. You undo the silk wrapping and let the layers slide apart like peeled fruit. There it is. A rich navy field explodes with saffron vines, leaf motifs in emerald and cream, and bursts of coral red at every quarter turn. You don't even need to guess. This is from Tabriz, the city where master weavers are born cranky and die legendary, where workshop looms creak to life before dawn, and the tiniest mistake could cost a full month's pay. You run a hand along the edge. The texture is absurd, like brushing your palm over cooled butter. Silk and wool knotted so tightly, the weave barely flexes under pressure. You count 1, 2, 3. Your copper hook slides in, measuring 110 knots per inch. You pause, you count again. That's not a typo. 110. You make a small noise in your throat. That's as close to a gasp as anyone in the inspection house is allowed. You jot in your notebook: Tabriz, ultra-high density workshop piece. Possibly royal commission. You won't say that out loud yet. You don't want Mehran waddling over with his eyebrows doing that disappointed thing they do when he smells arrogance. Still, your fingers tingle with possibility. The central medallion is intricate, a double-lobed floral star nested within nested leaves, like a dream trying to remember itself. You lean closer. Inside the star's core is a tiny, almost imperceptible script. Not a signature. A number, 27. You blink. Could this be the 27th rug in a matched set? A wedding dowry, perhaps, where each carpet marked a phase of the journey? If so, where are the others? You feel the cold tickle of curiosity down your spine. Historians still argue whether dowry sets were ever truly completed. Some say they were symbols, never meant to be finished. Others claim they existed but were scattered by war, inheritance, or fire. You sit back, eyes still on the number, and imagine the rest. Rug number 1, perhaps the size of a dinner plate, gifted at birth. Rug number 9, rolled beneath the family table. Rug number 15, offered at the daughter's wedding. And now rug 27, somehow preserved, relocated, and folded into this dusty room under your careful hands. You write, no visible flaw, unusual numeric identifier, 27. Possible dowry series, research required. You move to the borders. Each segment is a repeated lotus and palmette motif, which isn't uncommon, but this set is mirrored in alternating directions. Like a visual palindrome, you frown, that's not typical. You call over Farid, who trots up carrying 3 old wool swatches pinned to a board like pressed flowers. He stares at the border, then glances at you. That's backward, he whispers. You nod. Yes, and then forward again. He looks worried. Does that mean it's flawed? You shake your head. Or brilliant? He scribbles furiously, then knocks over a chair in his hurry to disappear again. You make a note to confiscate his ink pot next time he tries to balance it on the ledger shelf. You return to your work. The fringe is flawless, hand-knotted tassels spaced with the kind of perfection that makes you a little suspicious. No fraying, no signs of wear. This rug may have never touched a flaw. You examine the back and find tiny stitches near each corner. Hook marks, it was likely hung. That tracks. Rugs like this were more painting than furniture. Status objects, conversation starters, the original humble brags. The palette of this rug is particularly striking, not just the colours, but their tone. Slightly cooler than you'd expect. Even the red has a blue undertone, which means the dyer was either extraordinarily precise or just lucky. You brush your hand across the rug again and you swear its size. A long silken breath. You exhale in reply. Now there's something else. You spot a single floral bloom, tucked deep in the corner, obscured by the border design. Unlike the others, it's purple, soft violet actually. That color was notoriously difficult to achieve naturally and even harder to set properly. It fades fast, bleeds under damp, and rarely survives the years without dulling to grey. Yet here it is, crisp, fresh, nearly luminous. And here's the strange part. It appears only once. You check every other quadrant. No match. Just this one lonely violet bloom. You smile. Someone left this on purpose. A secret, a signature, a whispered story. Was it a lover's token, a joke, a flourish? Historians still argue whether single motif anomalies were codes between artisans, hidden names, or just acts of whimsy. You believe they were all three depending on the weaver's mood. You make one final note, single violet bloom, unique, possibly personal signature. Recommend conservation under filtered light. You rise from the bench and give the rug a final look. Not admiration, more like respect, like acknowledging an equal who chose a different life path. You roll the rug carefully, silk on the inside, wool on the outside, slipping a thin muslin sheet between each layer to prevent friction. It takes longer this way, but that's the point. When it's wrapped and tied, you place it gently in the awaiting provenance pile. Someone from the ministry will likely claim it, pretend they always knew it existed, and stash it in a climate-controlled cabinet for rich people to blink at once a year. But you saw it first. You held it, you found the violet, you sip your tea, still warm, still clove-sweet. Outside, the light is beginning to angle downward, catching in the window grills and tracing patterns across the floorboards like someone weaving shadows. You stretch. The next rug is here, smaller, hunched, wrapped in plain cloth that smells like old turmeric and river wind. You smile. It's going to be an interesting afternoon. The smaller bundle smells faintly of turmeric, dust, and something else, old leather maybe, or the bottom of a trunk, stored too long beneath a staircase. You lower yourself to your bench, knees clicking in quiet protest, and draw the plain cloth open. It parts without ceremony, revealing a rug unlike any of the day's previous puzzles. This one isn't symmetrical, it isn't bold, it isn't perfect, it's quiet. Muted earth tones cover most of its surface, dusty ochres, soft greys, and a hesitant sort of brown, the colour of almonds left in the sun. No central medallion, no commanding pattern, just simple, unhurried geometry that fades in and out like thought. You've seen this style before, tucked in village corners along the Zagros Mountains, the kind of rug woven at night by firelight, one row at a time, between stirring the lentils and keeping the goats from chewing on curtain hems. These weren't woven for sale, they were personal, household pieces made by women for their own families, or perhaps to carry into marriage, folded carefully with their other woven belongings. You lean in closer. The weave is loose, sparse even. You can see daylight through the knots in certain areas, but it's consistent. That matters more. It tells you that the weaver may have lacked fine wool or tight looms, but not skill. This rug is a whisper, not a shout. The border is charmingly inconsistent. What starts as a pattern of diamonds slowly shifts into a kind of boxy vine, then, unexpectedly, back to diamonds, but narrower. You can almost picture the weaver pausing at the end of one line, rethreading her shuttle, and thinking, let's try something else. Historians still argue whether these improvisations were planned or simply the result of weavers working from memory. Some say every shift has meaning, a code, a calendar, a forgotten dialect rendered in wool. Others argue it was just the natural rhythm of a woman weaving between chores, responding to the world as it changed around her. You like both theories, so you write in your notes, Zagros origin, asymmetrical border suggests improvisation or memory-based design, moderate wear, honest piece. You set your copper hook aside for now. 4. This isn't a rug you measure with tools. This is one you listen to. You run your fingers gently along the top edge and feel a raised knot. A bump. You stop. Shift the rug a little. There, just beneath the weave, you can feel a small lump. Something stitched into the warp. Your fingers pause. Carefully, you lift a corner of the backing and discover it. A tiny charm, no bigger than a date seed, wrapped in old thread and tucked into the base of the rug. Well now, that's rare. A protective talisman, most likely. You've only seen 3 others in your entire career, and all were sewn into household pieces, rugs never meant to leave the weaver's tent. These charms were said to guard against the evil eye, keep scorpions from crawling across the bedding, and ensure fertile dreams, or so the stories go. You note it down with reverence. Amulet sewn into base, thread-wrapped, possibly protective. You leave it in place, of course. That's not your story to undo. Behind you, someone clears their throat. Not Mehran this time. His sneezes are unmistakable. This is one of the older custodians, a woman named Soraya. She wears 3 shawls at once and never speaks above a whisper. She stops beside you and nods at the rug. "From Lorestan?" she murmurs. You blink. You recognize it? "My aunt had one," she says. "Same strange corners, same soft brown, smelled like clay and sheep." She doesn't say anything more, just nods once and glides away like a ghost in felt slippers. You smile to yourself. Oral confirmations are as valuable as any ledger entry. You examine the fringe, short, sparse, slightly frayed. But the knots hold, there's life in it still. You imagine a child napping on this rug, wrapped in scratchy blankets. You imagine snow outside, stew on the fire, and the low hum of old lullabies drifting between walls made of woven reeds. You feel absurdly at peace. This rug isn't going to impress collectors. It won't get framed in a museum or catalogued in glossy books, but it's real. And that, in this room full of ambition and precision and bragging dies, is worth more than gold leaf. You jot your final notes. Household Zagros piece. Practical. Talismans present. Retained for preservation of undocumented styles. Strong candidate for folk archive. You fold it gently, not tightly, just enough to cradle its softness, and you place it in the folk holding stack. That pile is growing slowly, one honest rug at a time. Someone opens the main door and a gust of warm, bizarre air blows in. It carries the scent of roasted pistachios, boiled dates, and distant laughter. You glance outside. The sun is beginning to dip, painting the far columns in rose gold and softened orange. You refill your tea for the 5th time, this one steeped with mint and maybe a hint of dried lime, and sip slowly. Your back aches. Your fingers are flecked with wool fuzz and ink stains. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. There's still one more rug before the sun sets. A rolled one in the corner, wrapped in an old linen sack, tied with twine. The tag is faded, almost unreadable. You don't mind. You were going to open it anyway. You stand slowly, quietly, slippers sliding over the floor like you've done this every day for 100 years. And maybe, in some way, you have. You approach the bundle tied with twine, a linen sack the colour of old teeth, spotted in places with what looks like dye smudges or possibly dried fig jam. The tag is attached with rusted wire, and the ink has long bled into the fabric. You squint. The only part still legible reads, "Ooh, why 1769? That could mean anything. A year, a weaver's name, or someone's idea of poetry. Rugs have a habit of arriving with partial identities. You untie the twine. It's stubborn. Someone knotted it as if the rug inside were prone to escape. Finally, the sack gives way, and the bundle inside spills out in a heap of folds and fragrance. You pause. This rug smells unlike the others, not woolly or dusty or mothball preserved. No, this one smells like tanned leather and almonds, like saddle oil. You inhale again. It's the scent of trade caravans, of being packed and repacked a dozen times, of nights under stars in places maps used to label as, "Here be lions." You unroll it, slow and steady. The weave reveals itself in stages. Deep rusts, saffron yellows, and a peculiar mint green you almost never see. Not jade, lighter than that. Fresher, more daring. The pattern is circular, swirling outward from a central spiral like a fingerprint made of vines. You run your hand across it. The knots are coarse but consistent. This isn't court weaving. This is tribal, or perhaps transitional, something between desert and city, something that straddles categories. Your copper hook confirms a medium knot count, about 60 per inch. Good, honest work. Strong enough to survive travel, but what catches your attention isn't the structure, it's the motif. Spirals, circles upon circles. That's not typical. You remember reading about this in one of the older ledgers. Designs like this were sometimes referred to as sunwheel rugs, used in Zoroastrian households long after the religion faded from political favor, kept quietly, revered quietly. Historians still argue whether these designs are deliberate religious references or simply aesthetic traditions that outlasted their meanings. Either way, you now have one unfurling across your lap, radiating mystery in every direction. You shift your gaze to the border and find something stranger still. Small stitched glyphs, one every few inches. Not decorative, not symmetrical. They almost look like accounting marks, as if someone tallied something across the edges of the rug. You trace one with your fingertip. 4 small vertical lines crossed by one horizontal stroke, then a space, then 3 verticals. A different count, another tally. What were they keeping track of? Possessions, days, children? You murmur, this rug is a ledger. You scribble furiously in your notebook. Possible Zoroastrian sunwheel motif. Glyphs resemble tally marks. Entire piece may function as a narrative or inventory. Your breath catches in your throat a little. Rugs tell stories. That's not news to you. But this one might actually contain one. You sit back, lifting your tea without looking. It's cold now, doesn't matter. Your fingers are warm from wool and wonder. The wool used here is rougher, likely from nomadic sheep, hardier than the fluffy ones from the northern farms. You run your palm over it again, slower this time. It holds shape, resists just a bit. A reminder that this rug wasn't meant for admiring eyes. It was used, preyed on, sat upon, possibly bartered with, though you hope not. It deserves better than to be reduced to currency. You examine one final corner and find what might be a stitched symbol for sun or fire. A shape like a wheel with tiny flames curling outward. Or maybe it's just a flower. Intent is hard to read when centuries stand between you and the needle. You decide to leave it ambiguous in your log. Sun, flower emblem, symbolic intent unclear. The fringe is short, uneven, but the knots are secure. No signs of rot. Someone took care of this, even if they folded it into a sack and forgot to label it properly. You roll it carefully with a wool buffer to protect the spirals from crushing and secure it with soft cotton string, not twine, never again. As you place it into the archive bin marked unusual symbolic, Farid appears with a bundle of papers. His face is flushed. There's a match, he whispers. You blink. To what? The sunwheel motif? It's in the ledger from the Yazd trade caravans. Page 32. He shoves the brittle paper under your nose. There it is, sketched in shaky ink, labelled, "Pattern seen on carpet traded in desert market, believed to be linked to pre-Islamic ritual use. Very old, very rare." You feel a little like your lungs forgot how to work. "Good catch," you say. Farid beams like he just found buried treasure, which honestly he sort of did. You pat the rolled rug gently. "This one stays here?" He nods solemnly. "It told a story." You smile. "They all do. Most just whisper." Outside, the sun has dipped lower. The shadows of the window lattice stretch across the floor, making everything look woven. A breeze rolls in, tugging at a corner of one curtain and sending a ripple of light over your tools. You take a breath, a long one, let it out slowly, then you stand. Another rug waits, this one rolled and tagged with a gold ink label. That usually means something high profile, something commissioned, or something cursed, depending on who you ask. You crack your knuckles, roll your shoulders, and smile just a little. There's still work to do, and stories left to hear. You approach the gold-tagged roll with a certain amount of suspicion. Gold ink means a few things around here, but boring isn't one of them. Sometimes it's reserved for pieces owned by high-ranking officials, other times for suspicious rugs with dramatic histories, like the one that allegedly bled dye onto a bishop's robes during transport. That was a mess. Literal and diplomatic, you lift the roll. It's oddly light, deceptively so. That sets off another flag in your mind. A large rug that weighs less than expected, could be silk or could be imitation. You place it on the bench and untie the gold-threaded ribbon. Overkill, really? You imagine some bureaucrat thinking, if the rug can't impress, at least the label should. As the fabric unfurls, you immediately get your answer. Silk. And not just any silk. This is the kind that glows faintly even in shade, the kind that shifts color with the angle of your gaze. It ripples over the bench like moonlight through water. You take a slow breath, then let it out. This is the type of rug that gets people excited or nervous. The design is exquisite. Floral arabesques that spiral outward like constellations. The symmetry is nearly surgical. You trace a corner with your index finger, barely grazing the threads. Yes, definitely, silk warp. And weft. High tension. Possibly 200 knots per square inch, maybe more. You don't need your copper hook. You already know this rug was made in a master workshop. Possibly Kashan, possibly Nine, somewhere with access to both obsessive weavers and enough money to pay them. But then you spot something strange, a slight imperfection, just a thread, barely a fraction of a millimeter out of place. You lean in, it's deliberate. A single knot done in a different color, deep navy, stitched in the middle of a pale ivory flower. Out of sight, unless you knew to look. It's a flaw, a fingerprint, a rebellion. You grin. This is the kind of tiny detail weavers used to sneak in to preserve their individuality in the face of rigid perfection. A lone stitch that says, I was here, sometimes called a Z or breath mark. A defiance against the divine symmetry they were asked to replicate. Historians still argue whether these imperfection knots were encouraged by tradition or quietly tolerated. But no one denies their presence in the best pieces. And now, here it is, winking at you from the heart of an ivory blossom. You make a careful note in your log. Workshop silk, probable Kashan. Estimated 200 kpsi, contains intentional Z, imperfection knot. Authentic signature of master weaver. You take another slow sip of tea. It's cold now, but that doesn't matter. It's ceremonial at this point. You continue your inspection, measuring the border repeats. Each is identical in scale and direction. That's rare. Even skilled weavers tend to drift slightly, but this rug holds its rhythm like a heartbeat. It feels like it was woven in a trance. The palette is restrained. Ivory, navy, silver, soft peach. No bold reds or aggressive greens. This is a rug that whispers luxury, the kind hung in rooms no one actually uses, the kind used in dowry exchanges where both families pretend they're above discussing finances. You imagine the weavers, rows of women in a vaulted brick workshop, their fingers flying, their mouths silently reciting patterns like prayer beads. Each hour marked not by clocks but by finished rows. One of them, likely the eldest, paused somewhere near the final quadrant and tied that one rebellious knot. A twitch in the pattern, a signature no inspector could unsee. You smile again, it's like being handed a secret. You flip the rug carefully to inspect the backside. The density is even. The knots packed tight as grains of sand. Not a single loose thread, not one. And then you spot something even stranger. Stitched into the selvage, barely visible, is a date. Tiny numbers formed from micro-knotting, hidden in the edge's reinforcement stitching. 1262, you frown. That doesn't match the Gregorian calendar, of course. You quickly run the math. If it's the Islamic calendar, that's roughly 1846 CE. That's earlier than expected. This rug doesn't feel 180 years old. The silk's too fresh, the dye's too stable. You tap your pencil against the bench. Could it have been rewoven? Or was it simply stored in perfect conditions for generations? Possibly a palace collection piece. You scribble furiously. Date stitched in selvage, 1262 AH. Condition contradicts age, POS in Palace Archive storage, cross-reference dye profile. Just then, Mehran shuffles by and glances down. He makes a low grumble, then mutters, "Ah, the one with the smug border." You raise an eyebrow. "You've seen this one?" He nods. "It came through 20 years ago, sent for appraisal, then vanished. Guess it's back." You blink, and no one filed a record. Mehran shrugs. "The label's gold. Bureaucrats forget things with flair." He leaves behind a smell of cloves and old leather. You return to the rug and stroke the fringe, still intact. No fraying, no loss. This rug was cared for obsessively. You imagine a velvet-lined drawer opened only for honoured guests or high-stakes haggling. You log your final thoughts. Exquisite condition, signature not present, dated AH 1262, recommend archival review for provenance, museum tier. You roll it slowly with layers of muslin to preserve the nap of the silk and place it gently into the conservation queue. When you stand again, your knees protest. That was the good kind of boring. The kind that hums with subtle discoveries, like unwrapping a letter written in the handwriting of time. The next piece is waiting, thicker, burlap-wrapped, the edges stained with what looks like spice residue. Probably a travel rug, probably with stories tucked into every fray. You crack your knuckles, refill your tea, and settle back in. The day's only halfway done. The burlap-wrapped bundle on your bench looks like it's seen better centuries. The cloth is stained a dozen shades of brown, tied with an old strip of leather that once may have belonged to a saddle. It smells of cumin, dust, and sweat. The scent of a rug that didn't just sit quietly in a room, but travelled, dragged across deserts, folded onto donkey backs, perhaps laid beneath countless tea kettles and mid-conversation elbows. You undo the strap and gently peel back the burlap. The rug inside resists slightly, as if it's not entirely convinced it's ready to be unwrapped. But with a little coaxing, it loosens and spills out in a tangle of thick wool, coiled like a snake settling into sleep. You smile. This is not a showroom rug, this is a traveller. The weave is wide, open, coarser than anything you've handled today. At a glance, you'd place it somewhere between Baluchi and Turkoman, tribal, definitely. Possibly even made en route, not in a fixed location. Some tribes had looms built to collapse and reassemble, allowing weavers to pick up their patterns right where they left off, even in the middle of migration. You lean down and press your palm into the centre. It feels like the firm surface of a well-packed earth floor. This is not a rug for lounging or display, it's a floor itself. A map of where someone's life unfolded, one meal, one game of cards, one sleepless night at a time. Your copper hook measures 30 knots per inch, not high but tightly packed for durability. The pattern is loose, abstracted geometry, red diamonds, brown zigzags. The colours are sun-faded, but you can tell they were once rich, dyed with madder, walnut husks, and maybe a touch of indigo where the wool was thin enough to drink it. You take a sip of your tea, then write, "Travelling rug, low-knot tribal weave, probable Baluchi origin, heavy wear but structurally sound." The edges are uneven, the kind of uneven that tells you the warp wasn't properly tensioned. You picture the loom, a wooden frame wedged between two rocks, maybe lashed to a tree. The weaver likely wrapped the yarn around her wrist, guiding each thread with the same motion she'd use to tie bread dough. The border is rudimentary, a broken chain of diamonds, but something catches your eye. One diamond is filled in, just one. The rest are empty, little open shapes. But this one? Solid. You lean closer. It's stitched with a slightly different shade, more rust than red. Intentional. You circle it in your notebook. Filled border motif, possibly symbolic. No repetition, significance unknown. Historians still argue whether such anomalies were spiritual markers, representing blessings, children, or even tribal codes. Others think they were memory aids, one filled diamond for each year on the road. You like the sound of that? This rug has the air of a diary. You check the fringe. One side's nearly worn off. The other holds firm with tight little loops that look like they were reinforced later, perhaps by a younger woman, long after the rug's first life had passed. You flip the corner and find something odd. A patch, a clumsy one, Someone has stitched in a different kind of wool, lighter, coarser, and clearly from a different sheep entirely. The thread even loops the wrong direction. A child's work, maybe? Or a husband trying to help? The repair has held, though, and that's the point. You jot, patch near lower left quadrant, mismatched fibre, possibly non-weaver repair. Endearing? Behind you, someone lets out a soft laugh. You turn. It's Soraya again, arms folded beneath her shawls. That's a real one, she says quietly. You nod. Yeah, it's lived. She kneels beside you, brushes her fingers over the filled-in diamond. This, it means safe return. My grandmother said women would weave one in just before the men left for trading season. You blink? Why only one? If he came back, she'd add a second. You look again, still just one. You don't say anything. Soraya sighs, stands and walks away, leaving the memory with you like a gift you didn't ask for, but now treasure. You roll the rug slowly like wrapping a child in a blanket. The wool squeaks faintly against itself, dry but not brittle. You tie it with a cotton band and mark the tag, Baluchi-style travel rug. Travel. Border anomaly, safe return motif. One present, none added, significant wear. You place it in the archive's personal collection bin, the one reserved for pieces too personal, too human, too full of breath to end up behind glass. Farid pokes his head in just as you sit back. There's a new one, big, from the provinces, needs 3 of us to lift. You groan, half for effect, half because your knees agree. Wrapped in what? You ask. Wheat sacks. Ah, that's how you know it's from the countryside. You refill your tea and follow him down the hall, slippers whispering over the wood. The work continues like the weave of an endless carpet, thread by thread, story by story. The wheat sack sits like a sleeping ox on the central floor, hulking and silent. 3 of you stand around it, Farid, the tall apprentice who still ties knots in his sleep, Reza, the grumbling porter who always smells like pickled garlic, and you, the one with the bad back and the good eye. Together you crouch, untie, and heave. The sack groans as it uncoils, layers of stitched jute peeling back to reveal, well, at first, just dust, a lot of it. Enough to make Reza sneeze 3 times and threaten to report the rug for seditious particles. You wave him off. As the dust clears, a shape emerges, broad, thick, and deeply textured. The rug underneath is enormous. You've seen banquet-sized pieces before, but this one looks like it could seat a caravan. It's folded in half, then again, like someone tried to compress a history book into a lunchbox. You begin the unrolling with reverence and a touch of dread. Big rugs are never boring, but they're often exhausting. More real estate means more chances for disaster. As it unfolds, it becomes clear. This is a Kurdish village piece. You'd bet your next tea on it. The design is bold, geometric, assertive, nothing timid here. Each medallion is the size of a dinner plate, filled with angular flowers and framed by what appear to be pairs of peacocks. Peacocks. You pause. Peacocks are unusual in Kurdish designs. You usually see them in older Yazd and Qajar court pieces. Could be influence, or someone sneaked a page from a pattern book they weren't supposed to be reading. You jot a note. Unusual motif, paired peacocks in Kurdish village rug. Possible cross-regional blending or personal motif. You count the knot density. Surprisingly high for a village rug, 55 per inch, consistently spaced. The wool is coarse but lustrous, possibly hand-washed in river water. You've always believed that mountain sheep gave up the best wool when washed just once, quickly, cleanly, without fuss. The old way, the border is classic, alternating serrated leaves and jagged diamonds, protective, symbolic. You run a fingertip along the edge and spot an interruption in the pattern. Instead of a diamond, there's a comb. Yes, it's a comb. Stitched neatly between the leaves, you blink. That's not a weaving symbol, that's domestic. Historians still argue whether these personal symbols, combs, earrings, teapots, were meant as visual puns or stitched poetry. Some say they represent dowry items, others believe they were quietly mocking the buyers. You bought this rug, but I wove my comb into it. You smile, you love a defiant rug. You write, comb symbol in lower border, possible personal emblem or dowry commentary. Farid squats beside you, pointing. That medallion has a rooster. You squint. So it does. Crude, charming, and slightly off-kilter, the rooster stands like it owns the place. Probably does. A lot of birds, Farid notes. Maybe the weaver liked mornings, you murmur, brushing a hand over the design. You pause. Some of the wool is a different texture. You check the other edge. Yes, confirmed. About a quarter of the rug was rewoven, possibly years later. The knot tension is different, the colour just slightly faded compared to the rest. A patched job, but not hasty. You write, rewoven quadrant, different wool grade, colour slightly off. Long-term repair suggests continued use and value. The fringe is wild, long, braided, some of it knotted together as if to keep from fraying apart. You find tiny beads tucked into two of the tassels, glass, turquoise, and one metal disc that might have been a coin before someone hammered it into submission. Now that's not standard. You pluck the fringe gently. The beads rattle. It sounds like a whispering wind chime. You glance at Farid. What do you think this rug was used for? He shrugs. Celebration? A dowry? A meeting space? You nod. A gathering rug. Some rugs are meant for silence, others for ritual. But this one? This rug heard laughter, loud conversations, slamming tea glasses, babies crawling, elders storytelling. The warp still vibrates with old echoes. You roll it slowly, with layers of burlap between each section to protect the pile, even though the rug probably doesn't need coddling. It survived decades of footfall and fireside snacks. Still, you like to think of your archiving as a kind of tucking in. A final nap. You write the final tag. Oversized Kurdish village rug. Bold motifs, personal symbols, narrative details. Recommend for oral history project. Ethnographic value high. Reza grumbles, rubbing his back. Tell me that was the last big one. You point to a wrapped piece by the far window, long and narrow like a stair runner. There's always one more. He groans. Farid just laughs and walks off, probably to draw that rooster. You stretch, joints clicking like old looms, and sip your tea. Cold again, but worth it. You glance back at the comb in the border. It lingers in your mind more than it should. A weaver, sitting under a low lantern, weaving her comb into a rug. Not because she forgot where it was, but because she wanted to be remembered. You make your way to the window alcove, where the next rug rests in a long, narrow bundle wrapped in what looks like linen, once used to carry grain. It's tied with red thread, probably wool, probably dyed with madder, possibly just the weaver's favorite string. That's the thing with these older pieces. Nothing is ever quite what it seems, and everything has a story stitched into the seams. The size and shape tell you this isn't a standard room rug, too narrow. You gently untie the thread. It's already fraying at the edges, breaking like old cobwebs, and begin to unroll. It stretches across the bench and keeps going and going. A corridor rug, or what some call a gallery runner, made not for lounging but for passage, for transitions. Rugs like this lined the entrances to old homes, connected rooms in wealthy estates, or were placed in caravansaries where boots, hooves, and sand made introductions before anyone spoke. But this one's special. It's not just a hallway rug, it's ceremonial. The pattern is hypnotic, a single repeating motif. Nested diamonds, each within the next, within the next. They seem to pulse as your eye follows them, each slightly smaller, slightly shifted. The effect is deliberate, intentional. You squint. This isn't decoration. This is design meant to move people, to guide footsteps, maybe even thoughts. Historians still argue whether certain carpet designs were meant to shape the pace and direction of processions, slow the walk, align the group, prepare the mind. This pattern, with its gradual symmetry, feels more like choreography than ornament. You whisper to no one. This was a rug for walking slowly. You lean in, fingertips brushing over the wool. It's tight, springy, a little coarse. The knots are consistent, about 42 per inch. Likely tribal. You'd bet it came from the northwest, maybe from the Shah Savan. They made rugs that understood movement. You make a note. Probable Shah Savan runner, repeating nested diamond motif. Suggests ceremonial or processional use. The colours are subdued, burnt orange, faded indigo, tobacco brown, and a strange grey-green that you first mistake for shadow. It's not a cheerful rug, but it's not mournful either, it's serious. You trace the diamonds to the very end and spot a sudden disruption. One diamond is broken, split open, its top edge missing, just that one. You frown, then you smile. Another Z, another deliberate imperfection. But here, it means more. This broken diamond comes precisely at the midpoint, the exact center of the rug. You write quickly. Intentional broken motif at center may symbolize passage or threshold. Perhaps this rug didn't just guide feet, it marked a crossing, a before and after. You brush the edge of the fringe, it's uneven. You lift a strand and find it's been re-knotted, not once, but several times. The kind of repair you only see when a rug gets used, not displayed, not tucked away. Used day after day, year after year. And then, beneath one knotted strand, you find a small, pressed metal disc, not stitched in, just tucked into the fold. You pull it out carefully. It's tarnished, round, no larger than a thumbnail. Thumbnail. There's a symbol stamped on it, two lines curving around each other, like mirrored fish or crescent moons chasing tails. It's not a coin. It's a seal. You hold it in your palm for a moment, letting its weight settle into your skin. The seal is older than the rug. By a century, maybe more. A family token, perhaps, or a charm. Or simply something hidden for safekeeping and then forgotten. You write, pressed metal seal hidden in fringe, possibly pre-rug. Symbol suggests tribal insignia or talisman. Farid appears again, this time balancing a tray of warm mint tea and sesame bread. He sets it down, then eyes the rug. Looks like a path, he murmurs. You nod. Not just a path, a crossing. He crouches. It feels ceremonial. You hand him the seal. He turns it over in his fingers, then places it reverently beside the rug. Whatever it meant, someone kept it close. You sip the tea. It's warm, sharp with mint, and sweet from the bread's residue. It's the kind of flavor that lingers, just like the rug beneath your fingers. You begin to roll it, slowly, threading muslin between each coil to protect the aging wool. When you reach the midpoint, the broken diamond, you pause and rest your hand there. Something happened in that space, a step taken, a vow made, a goodbye whispered. You don't need to know the exact details to feel it. You finish the roll, tuck the seal into a padded envelope, and mark the package for symbolic archives, probable ritual use. Outside, the light has shifted again. Late afternoon, the golden stretch of shadow time when everything softens. Your bones know it's almost time to stop, but there's one more rug on the intake shelf, narrower still, wrapped in black cloth. You sip the last of your tea, now cool, and rise with a quiet breath. The stories aren't done yet. The final rug of the day waits on the intake shelf, narrow and wrapped in black cloth. That alone is unusual. Most rugs arrive in burlap, linen, even old grain sacks, but black cloth? That feels like a message, or a warning. You lift it gently, it's surprisingly light, too light maybe. You set it on your bench and untie the knots at either end, which come undone far too easily, like they've been waiting to be loosened for decades. The cloth falls away. What lies beneath is crooked. Not dramatically, just enough to make your eyes twitch. The rug is a long runner, hand-woven, probably from a small village. But the warp is askew, the entire piece leans slightly to the left, borders slant. The central medallions, if you can call them that, are off-center, and drifting like leaves floating on a current. You sit back. You've seen 1,000 rugs, but few this unbalanced. Yet it holds together, despite the tilt, despite the sway. It's a whole thing, and somehow it's still charming. You mutter, crooked but confident. You lean in, checking the wool. It's coarse, village spun, no doubt. Dyed in simple shades, rust, charcoal, and something that was once green but has since faded into the colour of old olives. There's no symmetry, no grid. The pattern begins in one direction, switches part-way through, and then, as if the weaver grew bored or inspired, shifts again entirely. You start counting knots and nearly laugh out loud. 38 per inch at the top, 42 in the middle, 31 near the end. A rug with mood swings. You grab your notebook and jot asymmetrical runner, warp visibly askew, knot count inconsistent, pattern meanders, probably woven by single artisan without guide grid. Farid strolls by, sipping his tea. He peers over your shoulder. Looks drunk, he says. You grin. Or rebellious. He leans closer. Is that a camel? You squint. In the far end panel, amid a thicket of geometric shapes and wandering vines, sits something resembling a camel. 4 legs, hump, blank stare. Yes, you say. Or it's a stubborn horse. Either way, someone wanted it there. The camel is stitched with a thicker thread than the rest, coarser, as if it were added after the rest was complete. And around it, oddly, there are small jagged motifs. You count 6. All clustered like stars in a sky the camel isn't paying attention to. Historians still argue whether these animal inclusions in rural carpets were meant as clan markers, spirit animals, or simply decoration. But the placement here, off-centre, nearly off-rug, suggests something else. A last-minute thought. An emotional impulse? You sip your tea and let the idea unfold. Maybe this was a mourning rug. There's no formal pattern of mourning carpets in the records, but you've seen enough human grief to recognise its fingerprints, the off-balance symmetry, the disjointed knot tension, the camel that looks like it's been left behind. You note possible personal weaving. Unbalanced form suggests emotional state. Consider cultural grief context. You check the back and spot something you didn't expect. A series of faint numbers stitched into the selvage. Not years, not Arabic numerals, tally marks, 7 short dashes, 1 slash through the middle. Repeated 4 times, 7 4 times, 28. You trace your fingers over them. Not decorative, definitely intentional. You flip back to the camel and the 6 shapes around it. Maybe the weaver lost someone or something and marked each year or each absence in thread. Your shoulders suddenly feel heavier, as if this rug is asking you not just to inspect but to witness. Farid is still hovering. You don't send him away. He's quiet now. You murmur. Sometimes they're not mistakes. He nods. They're memories. You roll the rug slowly, gently, not to hide its crookedness but to honour it. You wrap it in muslin, mark the tag, asymmetrical village runner, probable personal weaving, contains tally motifs and symbolic camel. Emotional construction likely, recommend soft archive, textile empathy research. Farid blinks. Textile empathy? You shrug. It's not a real field, yet. You place the roll on the low shelf reserved for the quiet ones, the rugs that speak less to scholars and more to the parts of us that still kneel in dirt, whisper to ancestors, and stitch love into mistakes. Outside, the sun has vanished. The sky is lavender grey. The shadows inside the inspection house lengthen, stretching past the benches, curling around the rugs still to be seen. You clean your tools, brush stray wool from your lap, and take one last sip of mint tea. Lukewarm. Perfect. As you slip off your slippers and gather your notes, you pass Mehran, who's nodding off over a faded Shiraz rug with a rooster that refuses to face forward. Crooked bird, he mutters, eyes closed. You smile. You push open the heavy door and step back into the evening bazaar, where the smell of roasted chestnuts mingles with saffron and stories. Your day ends not with applause, not with gold coins or grand declarations, but with a quiet certainty. You bore witness to lives woven, knotted, frayed, and mended, and tomorrow more will come. You return the next morning before the sun properly wakes, your slippers whispering against the stone floor as dew still clings to the outer courtyard tiles. The inspection house breathes its usual breath, warm wool, old wood, the faint sting of vinegar where someone must have cleaned a dye basin late the night before. You slip into your bench like it's an extension of your spine and stretch your fingers before touching anything. Your first assignment is already waiting, left carefully at your station with a note in Mary's spidery handwriting. Evaluate for water damage, may be usable or cursed. She always leaves dramatic flourishes. It's why you like her. You tug the wrap free, plain linen, damp in places, and roll the rug out cautiously. As the folds fall away, you spot it immediately, a wide, discoloured stain across the lower third, fanning out like a river delta. Water-damaged wool. It curls slightly at the edges, shrunken and stiff. A shame. But still, the design survives. You see a wide central panel filled with jagged stars and chevrons, a layout you recognize from the Caspian Sea basin. Gilan, perhaps. That coastal humidity often resulted in rugs like this, bold colours, strong contrast, but prone to rot if not stored carefully. The pattern is still strong, a repeating red and black zigzag that seems to flicker if you look too long. You lean in, touch the roughened edge of the damage. Surprisingly, the pile is intact. Hardened, but not lost. You note in your book, Caspian region probable. Water damage present, base threads intact, pile salvageable. You test the knots near the edge, 72 per inch, respectable for a domestic rug. The colours are likely natural, madder, iron, walnut shell, but you notice one particularly vivid yellow that feels too bright. Synthetic? You run the fibre across your palm. There's a crunch to it. Historians still argue when aniline dyes first crept into domestic weaving. Some say as early as the 1860s, others claim they didn't reach rural areas until the 20th century. Either way, this yellow, brilliant acidic, tells you someone took a risk. You note, aniline dye detected, yellow centre chevron. Contrast with natural palette suggests transitional dye era. As you unroll the remaining length, you spot something stranger still. The rug ends not in a fringe, but in loops. Thick, finger-sized wool loops, like the end of a scarf. Not decorative, functional. You frown, rugs aren't usually looped like this, but saddle blankets sometimes are. Or prayer rugs meant to be tied down in the wind. You tug gently at one loop. It holds, still sturdy. You lift a corner and find small leather ties stitched along the edge, now worn to soft ribbons. This wasn't a house rug, this was a travel piece, maybe even a personal prayer rug. You imagine it staked to the ground beside a caravan at dawn, rolled and tied again before evening. Wind-touched, Sue. Touched, sun-beaten, used not for decoration, but devotion. You scribble in your notebook, tether loops and leather ties present. Non-residential use, probable, personal or religious. Water damage from exposure, not storage. You check the back, fingers tracing the warp lines. In the centre, stitched in orange thread, faded nearly to beige, is a symbol. A simple triangle with a line bisecting it. You stare. It looks familiar, not a weaver's mark, not tribal. Then it clicks. It's the symbol for direction, a Tibla marker. This rug was used for prayer. You stare at it again. The loops, the leather, the centre panel, now clearly meant to face Mecca. Suddenly the damage means more. This rug didn't sit in a corner. It travelled, accompanied. It bent beneath knees and sun. The water stains may have come from ritual washing or desert rain. This wasn't cursed. It was loved. You feel a twinge behind your eyes, the kind that comes when you remember something you never experienced. You close your notebook. You call over Soraya, who arrives like she always does, without sound and already sipping tea. She leans over your shoulder, examines the rug, and simply says, "It faced east." You nod, still does. Together you roll it carefully, not tight. This one gets air. You wrap it in breathable cloth and tag it. Caspian prayer rug, loop-tied, Qibla marked. water exposure consistent with use. Recommend conservation and oral history study. You slide it into the archive bin labelled pilgrimage and personal use. Outside, you hear the bells of a passing donkey cart and the rhythmic knock of a merchant opening his shutter. The day begins again, predictably, perfectly. Farid appears with 2 new bundles, one tied with blue ribbon, one bulging with loose fringe. He's grinning. You raise an eyebrow. "Which one's trouble?" He points to the fringe bundle. "That one made Razor swear." "Perfect," you say, setting your tea down. The cloth falls away, the story begins. The fringe bundle arrives on your bench like a guest who clearly didn't knock. Strands of wool stick out at every angle, some frayed, some knotted together, as if they tried to stage an escape during the journey. It smells sharp, something between salt, camel sweat, and dried tobacco. You untie the cloth wrap, which is stiff with age, and the contents practically unravel into your lap. Even Razor, gruff as he is, had good reason to swear. The rug inside is a mess, but not just any mess, a deliberate one. The first thing you notice is the fringe, or rather, fringes, plural. One side of the rug features long, braided tassels that hang like seaweed. The other side has no fringe at all, just an abrupt edge, cut clean, not worn, intentional. You frown and lean in. The design is confusing. Not random, but also not coherent. It's a mashup of styles, a Harry's-style medallion, and in the centre, surrounded by tribal hooked diamonds you usually see in Turkoman pieces, all wrapped in a floral vine that screams urban Isfahan. This rug is a linguistic collision in wool. You reach for your copper hook. The knot count changes within the same row, 48 per inch on the right, down to 39 by the left. That's not just poor planning, that's improvisation or sabotage. You scribble inconsistent knot count within weft row. Style collision suggests composite weaving, possibly collaborative or stitched together fragments. Farid peeks in again and whistles. Is it broken? No, you murmur. It's a quilt disguised as a rug. Because now you see it, tiny seams where one section has been expertly joined to another. You flip the rug. On the reverse, the proof is clearer. 4 distinct panels, each woven separately, then joined by fine thread in a hidden stitch. Someone made this rug out of other rugs. Historians still argue whether this patchwork tradition arose from scarcity, creative recycling, or ritual practice. In some nomadic cultures, old rugs from deceased relatives were stitched into new pieces to preserve memory through texture and touch. You pause, looking again at the erratic motifs, the sudden jump from floral to geometric, the corner where the pattern flips upside down. This isn't a mistake, it's a memorial. You write quickly. Composite construction, 4 panels joined post-weaving, patterns from varying regions, Harry's, Turkoman, Isfahan. Possible memorial object. Recommend oral review with tribal weavers. The colours add to the mystery. You count at least 5 dye palettes. The reds don't match. One is a deep madder, another a more orange cochineal. Even the blues vary. Sky blue in one section, denim dark in another. A museum curator would call it a crime. You call it brave. You check the selvage. One side has beads, glass, pink, and oddly, one shaped like a pomegranate. The other side, nothing, just tight whip stitching. Farid crouches beside you. Why would someone make this? You run a hand over the rug's surface, feeling the seams like scars. Because they couldn't let go of the pieces. He nods. Like a scrapbook. No, you say softly. Like a stitched-together song. You flip the rug over again and find one final detail. A stitched name, barely visible in the weft. 4 Persian letters in dark wool. Shirin, Shirin. The thread is faded and the stitching is clumsy. Not done by a weaver, likely a family member, a child, or a husband, maybe even someone mourning. You feel your throat catch a little. You close your notebook for a moment and just sit with the rug, not to analyze, not to categorize, just to listen. Eventually, you write, name stitched into weft, Shirin. likely recipient or memorial subject. Emotional artifact, composite form indicates intentionality beyond utility. You roll the rug carefully, more reverently than usual. The fringe crackles, the stitched seams sigh. You wrap it in soft linen and tag it not with its origin, but with its purpose. Composite memory rug, panels joined in mourning or tribute, contains stitched name Shirin. Archive as singular object, not by region. You walk it to the quiet bin yourself. No one else touches it. Back at your bench, your tea is cold, again, of course. But now even that feels part of the rhythm. One moment forgotten, so another could be remembered. The next rug is already on your bench. A thin roll bound with a silk ribbon, pale blue, likely a workshop piece, likely from the city. Farid raises an eyebrow. Back to the normal ones. You glance at the ribbon. We'll see. You pick up your hook, pull the rug closer, and begin again. The pale blue silk ribbon slips through your fingers like river water, smooth and cool, as you untie it. It's not a strong ribbon, decorative, not practical. The kind someone would use for a gift or a symbolic gesture. A final touch tied by someone who wanted this rug to be remembered as something special before it left their hands. You gently roll back the outer layer and pause. Oh, the rug beneath is almost too perfect, too precise, a workshop piece without question. Likely city-made, Isfahan, Yazd, or even Nain. But what stands out isn't just the technical precision, it's the timidity. You know this type. Rugs made for display in merchants' windows. Commissioned for export or wealthy clients who wanted the idea of Persia, bottled neatly and framed in borders. Everything symmetrical, nothing personal. Aesthetic comfort food. You flatten the edges and begin your inspection. The field is a soft ivory, almost untouched. It acts like a stage for the design, which is a garden scene in soft rose, faded emerald, and cool blue. Stylized trees rise in rhythmic pairs, perfectly matched. Birds perch at identical angles. Flowers open in mirror image across the vertical axis. It's pretty, technically excellent, and somehow sterile. Farid approaches, sets down tea, and glances at the rug. Well, he says, this one doesn't want to be complicated. You nod. No secrets. But that's not quite true. No rug is ever truly hollow. You start with the knot count. It's absurd. Over 300 per square inch, silk on silk, the kind of weave that requires months of labor and an artisan with eyes like hawks and fingers like birds. You jot, high-density workshop piece, ester 300 kpsi, silk foundation and pile, likely Isfahan export design. Then you begin the deeper inspection. You count the garden motifs, 7 cypress trees, 13 birds, 4 fountains. It's all balanced, too balanced. But as you shift the rug to catch the light, something odd happens. One of the birds, nestled in the corner, under the leftmost tree, shimmers a slightly different color. You lean closer. It's not the dye, it's the direction of the pile. Pile direction in silk rugs can create light illusions. If you weave one bird with its knot slant reversed, it shines differently. And this one, it faces the other way. You reach for your copper hook, stroke the pile upward. Yes, confirmed. It's the only motif in the entire rug knotted against the rest. Farid notices your expression. What is it? You sit back. We found a rebel. You note in your log, one bird reversed in knot direction, deliberate, hidden motif, meaning unclear. Historians still argue whether reversed knots were mistakes, flourishes, or coded messages. In this case, you doubt it was an accident. The artisan was too skilled. No, this was a fingerprint, a whisper in the silk. You smile. I think this rug was woven by someone bored out of their mind. Farid laughs. Or someone who wanted to say hello. You flip the rug and check the selvage. It's neat, machine perfect. No stitched signature, no initials. Of course not. These workshop rugs weren't meant to carry names, just brand marks invisible to buyers. You find the mark, barely there, stitched into the corner on the back, a small circle with 3 threads inside. The insignia of the Darien workshop, a known producer of city rugs in the late 19th and early 20th century. Renowned for precision, infamous for their management. There are stories. Artisans forbidden from inserting personal details, fired for adding initials, encouraged to think of their work as a product, not an expression. And yet, this one bird, you stare at it again, just a twitch of individuality in a sea of decorum. You jot, Darian workshop. Hidden reversed motif suggests silent resistance or personal expression. You sip your tea, still warm, still sweet. You take a long breath, exhale slowly. The rug before you may not have the raw honesty of the tribal ones, or the grief-laced poetry of the memorial patchwork. But it has something else. A ghost of rebellion. A knot flipped in defiance, a voice lowered but not silenced. You re-roll the rug slowly, folding the blue silk ribbon back around it, not for preservation, but as a kind of nod to its original farewell. You tag it, workshop silk, high KPSI, export design, hidden reversed knot motif, recommend for microanalysis and artisan study. You place it in the stack labelled subtle stories. Farid adds a note beneath your tag. One bird was not like the others. You smile, he's learning. Outside you hear the call of a melon seller echoing down the alley. The day grows louder, the work grows quieter. The next piece waits, narrow, faded, tagless. You stand, stretch, refill your tea and return to your bench. One rug at a time. One whisper after another. The next rug arrives unannounced, untagged and nearly invisible. It's wrapped in faded canvas the colour of ash, secured with a knot so old it crumbles under your touch. As you peel back the layers, a cascade of dust releases into the air, catching the slanting light like powdered history. You hold your breath and squint as the rug underneath comes into view. It's grey, just grey. At first glance it looks unfinished. The kind of textile you might mistake for a forgotten scrap or backing, but you know better. In this world, plainness is sometimes a disguise. You unroll it fully. It's narrow, a little over 2 meters long, about 1 wide. The weave is tight. The fibres feel like wool, but rougher, perhaps goat hair woven in, or simply wool taken from older animals. The design, if you can call it that, is barely perceptible. Faint bands of alternating weft thickness, just enough to form a soft ripple in the light. No colour, no pattern, no fringe, no border. It is the most understated rug you've ever seen. And yet, there's a calmness to it, an authority. The same way an unmarked grave demands respect, not because of what it says, but because of what it doesn't. You reach for your copper hook, knot count, 54 per inch, tighter than you'd expect for something so quiet. You write, unmarked, grey rug. Goat wool blend likely, dense weave, no ornament, probable functional or ritual use. Farid leans over your shoulder, chewing the last of a sesame stick. This one's a ghost, he mutters. You nod. Or a monk. He snorts. A monk rug? You glance at the weave again. Tell me this doesn't look like something woven in silence. He stops chewing. Okay, fine, it does. You run your fingers along the warp. Each line is steady, no skips, no floats. Whoever wove this had discipline in their hands. You imagine them sitting alone at a frame loom, repeating the same motion for days, maybe weeks. No variation, no distraction, only thread and breath. Historians still argue whether these so-called austerity rugs were used by spiritual orders or merely created for utilitarian purposes. Some claim they served as meditation mats for Sufi dervishes. Others think they were laid in prayer niches, their simplicity a reflection of humility. You find a small corner that curls up and reveals a stitched symbol. Barely there, 2 intersecting lines in black thread forming an X with a circle around it. You frown. That's not a maker's mark. It's older, a tribal warding symbol. You've seen it once before, stitched into the lining of a nomad's travelling cloak, meant to protect the wearer or the sleeper. You jot, warding symbol stitched into rear corner, probable protective or spiritual function. You flip the rug over fully and find a small patch barely larger than a coin, repaired with a slightly lighter thread. It's not a recent fix. The patch has aged with the rug. The threads have darkened together. This is the kind of mending done by someone who slept on it, not someone trying to preserve it for display. Farid leans closer. This was someone's bed. You nod. Probably for years. He touches the patch gently. The stitching's uneven. Done in the dark, maybe, you say. Or after a long day. He nods and backs away, quieter than before. You let your fingers drift over the fabric again. There's a warmth to it now. Not literal, it's still goat wool after all, but something else. Familiarity. A softness born from repetition. This rug wasn't meant to be seen. It was meant to be lived on. You roll it slowly, wrap it in clean muslin, and write the tag by hand. Grey austerity rug. Tribal goat wool blend. No motif. Probable personal bedding or meditative use. Contains warding symbol. Archive under everyday sacred. You carry it to the bin yourself. Not because it's fragile, but because it deserves stillness. As you return to your station, Mehran passes by, carrying a narrow runner over one arm. He pauses just long enough to say, "The quiet ones always know the most," then disappears into the cataloguing room. You settle back into your bench and sip your tea, which tastes colder than usual, like a whisper from stone. The next rug is square, boxy, and wrapped in cotton dyed a soft ochre. Its tag is handwritten, smeared by time, and contains only one word, Mazandaran. Your eyebrows rise. Mazandaran rugs rarely leave the mountains. You smile, set down your cup, and reach for the cloth. You unfold the ochre-dyed cloth with both hands, careful not to tug at the corners. It crinkles slightly, the sound dry like autumn leaves, and reveals a rug that's not so much one piece as three. Mazandaran. The moment you see the alternating bands of brown, red, and undyed cream, you know the tag was right. This is a Corsi rug, or maybe a jella, woven not as ornament, but as textile architecture, wall covering, tent divider, winter blanket, ceremonial shroud, sometimes all four in a single lifetime. The Mazandaran region, buried in the forested northern mountains of Iran, produces textiles that don't follow the usual rules. They aren't symmetrical, they don't care about medallions or floral sprays. They are stripes and weight. They are colour as mood, wool as warmth. You spread the piece fully on your bench and begin passing it. 3 vertical panels stitched together with coarse thread. Simple join seams unhidden, unapologetic. Each panel features horizontal stripes, dark walnut brown, faded crimson, cream so warm it looks like tea with milk. No pattern, just rhythm. You breathe out through your nose. Slowly. This rug is a heartbeat. The panels don't quite match. The leftmost has tighter weave density, the centre slightly looser. The rightmost panel, well, it sags a little in the middle. You run your hand over the join line. It's secure, but imperfect. Whoever stitched these pieces together wasn't trying to impress anyone. They were just trying to make something whole. You jot in your notebook, 3-panel Mazandaran textile, horizontal bands, panel joins visible. Varying weft tension suggests multiple weavers all weaving across different sessions. Farid appears with a spoon and a date pastry, which he drops onto your notes like it's a bookmark. "You'll like this one," he says. "It doesn't care what anyone thinks." You nod, brushing crumbs away. It's confident. Quietly so. You begin counting knots, not that it matters here, but habit holds. The wool's dense, coarser than city rugs, but satisfying to touch. Maybe 25 knots per inch, give or take. Meant more for draping or insulation than foot traffic. You make a note. Utility-grade weave, high lanolin content, likely hand-spun wool. But what draws your attention next isn't the structure, it's the wear. Along the bottom of the central panel is a faint darkening, shaped roughly like a circle with lines stretching out. You touch it gently. The fibres are softer here, slightly polished. You know this mark, a Corsi burn. Corsi were low, square tables with heaters underneath, charcoal in the older days, and blankets or rugs thrown over the top to keep the warmth trapped. while the family sat with their legs tucked beneath. Long winters, long conversations, slow meals. The center of every home in the mountain, cold. This rug sat beneath a corsi for years. You smile to yourself. You note thermal wear pattern consistent with corsi use, probable domestic winter textile. Patina supports long-term use. Historians still argue whether Mazandaran rugs were ever woven just for beauty. Some believe they were always functional first, with aesthetic emerging from necessity. Others argue that the stripes contain symbolic language, cycles of sun and shadow, birth and death. You look again at the color sequencing: brown, red, cream. Then brown again, then nothing. The pattern breaks at the end, no closing stripe, the rug just stops. You tap your pen lightly. Unfinished or intentionally open-ended? You scribble, final stripe missing, may signify non-closure. Investigate local funerary practices, possible symbolic omission. You flip the rug and find something else, a small patch sewn into the back. It's made from a different textile entirely, a floral printed cotton, stitched like a pocket. You open it gently. Inside is a single dry bay leaf, curled, fragrant. You stare. No one stores bay leaves in rugs, not unless they meant something. Farid sniffs it. Keeps moths away? You shake your head. Could have used lavender or cedar. This is something else. A gesture, a token, a memory. You slide the bay leaf back into its patch. You don't need to understand everything. You log your final note. Bay leaf stitched into cotton patch. Non-standard preservation method. Possible personal symbolism. You roll the rug slowly, respecting the soft sag of the third panel, the old charcoal patina, the unassuming strength. You don't tie it with silk or archive tape. Just a thick band of unbleached cotton, knotted simply. You tag it. Mazandaran 3-panel corsi rug, domestic origin, functional heritage, contains burn pattern, bay leaf. Recommend ethnographic oral history linkage. Farid gives you a small smile. I like these ones best, he says. They don't pretend. You nod. They remember, though. Outside, wind scrapes softly across the shutters. A storm may be coming. Inside, the rugs are safe. The stories are warm. You sip your tea. Cold again, you don't mind. The next rug is already leaning against your bench, a square bundle wrapped in gold-threaded cloth. That's unusual, maybe ceremonial, maybe dangerous. You lift it carefully. You rest the square bundle on your bench, like it might be hiding something sacred, or something asleep. The gold-threaded wrap catches the lantern light, scattering it like crushed mica. This isn't flashy gold, not merchant wealth gold. This is faded, weathered, ceremonial. The kind used in weddings or burials. You untie it slowly. The cloth falls away in silence, revealing a rug so tightly wound it almost springs open of its own volition. You pause, place one hand flat on the top, and exhale before releasing the pressure. It unfurls with a surprising softness, like fabric rather than floor. The pile is fine, the wool short and even, the entire piece nearly square, unusual for Persian rugs, which favor rectangles like scripture favors columns. It's small, perhaps 5 feet by 5 feet. The design is deceptively simple, a central rosette surrounded by open space, ringed again with 4 smaller medallions, one in each corner. But what makes you stop is how it's done. The rosettes are not floral, they are stars, not the pointed kind. These are soft, curling, almost spiral, galaxies. A rosette meant not to mimic nature, but the heavens. You inhale slowly. You've only seen one other rug like this, and that one was labeled a sofreye, AQD, a ceremonial wedding spread used in certain Zoroastrian and early Islamic traditions, placed beneath the offering table, meant never to be walked upon. You kneel to inspect more closely. The knot density is fine, but not obsessive, around 90 knots per inch. The field is ivory, the stars in a charcoal blue that has dulled into grey-green. The corner medallions are aligned with a gentle intentionality. You measure from the edge to each star, not perfectly symmetrical, close, but not machine perfect. That alone tells you this rug was not a workshop piece. It was done by hand, by someone who cared about meaning more than math. You jot in your notebook, square ceremonial textile, 4-star corner medallions with central cosmic motif, hand-woven, approx 90 kpsi, probable Zoroastrian or early Islamic Sofreye AQD. Farid appears as usual, silent until he's too close, causing you to jump slightly. He peers down. Is that you? Space? You nod. Not literal, but yes, someone wove the sky. He whistles under his breath. Why would they do that? To invoke it, you say, or maybe just to hold it under the bread and sweets. You run your fingers across the border. No vines, no tendrils, just a thick band of alternating lines. Thick, thin, thick again. A rhythm, a heartbeat. You check the reverse. Clean, tight, a weft of soft grey wool. And there, stitched in pale rose thread, just under the top right corner, is a single word. Amid, Omid, hope. You stare at it for a long time. It's not hidden, it's quiet, meant to be seen only when the rug is lifted. You write, backstitch embroidery. Omid, hope. Placement suggests blessing or intent, likely woven as devotional piece or matrimonial gift. Farid kneels beside you. This isn't for walking, is it? You shake your head. It's for waiting, for praying, for celebrating. He points at one corner. That star's missing a tip. You lean closer. He's right. One medallion is incomplete, its uppermost lobe clipped short, not frayed, not broken, just absent. Deliberate? He asks. Historians still argue about partial motifs. In Persian weaving, flaws are sometimes left intentionally, reminders of human imperfection. But here, with 3 complete stars and 1 truncated, the choice feels more personal. You mark it in your notes. Incomplete corner medallion. May symbolize absence, loss, or deliberate spiritual humility. You smooth your hand across the surface again. The rug is warm from your touch now, its fibers soft and giving. There's a tenderness to it, a restraint, as if the weaver was speaking in a low voice and expected the listener to lean in. You flip it back over, fold it once, then again, then cradle it in muslin. You tag it, Sofreye AQD, ceremonial square rug with celestial motifs. Includes omid embroidery and incomplete corner medallion. Recommend ritual archive placement. Farid follows you down the aisle to the sacred objects cabinet, rarely used, carefully dusted. You unlock it, place the folded square on the middle shelf, and close the glass gently. Neither of you says anything. There's reverence in the silence. Back at your station, another rug has arrived. Taller, bundled tightly with no visible colour. Its tag is simple, efficient. Hamadan 2.4x 1.3, rep weave 20th C. You sip your tea, feel the ghost of the stars on your fingers, and smile faintly. Not every rug is a galaxy, but every one holds gravity. You untie the next bundle with quiet fingers, noting how the fabric binding feels coarser than most. Industrial cotton, dyed a slate grey, the sort used in train station tarps or old military satchels. Efficient, unlovely. Whoever sent this piece wasn't sentimental. The tag is practical. Hamadan 2.4x 1.3, rep weave 20th C. Hamadan, a city of 100 villages all weaving under one name, each with their own voice, some sharp, some soft, or a little stubborn. Hamadan rugs don't try to impress with high knot counts or delicate silk. They're workhorses, everyday rugs for everyday life. You slide the bundle open. What spills out is thick, not in density, though the wool is strong, but in presence. It lands on the bench with a soft thud and unrolls like a sigh. The field is rich, the colour somewhere between rust and blood orange. The pattern? Repeating botte motifs like teardrops with curled ends, ancestral symbols of fertility, eternity, or possibly just a leaf, depending who you ask. You lean closer. The weave is rep, or more precisely, weft-faced, meaning the horizontal threads are packed tightly over the verticals, hiding the warp completely. This gives the rug its heft, its ribbed texture, and that unmistakable ripple when rolled. You run your hand along the surface. It feels like corduroy, that remembers every footstep. You jot in your notebook, Hamadan, rep weave, 20th C. Botte motif field, repeated, with minor variation. Strong weft saturation, everyday domestic function. Farid arrives with something resembling tea, but clearly doctored with extra sugar. He peers down at the rug. That colour's loud. You nod. That's the point. They weren't shy. You check the border. It's simple, a band of white zigzags. But in the upper right corner, the pattern stutters. 2 zigzags run together and then stop. A gap. You lean in. The space is deliberate. Someone removed a section, unpicked it. You touch the threads. The edges are soft, not torn, not broken, just unravelled. You blink. A memory stirs. An old tale Mehran once told about a weaver in Tuisakan who removed a section of border from her rugs every time she lost someone, mourning not with black cloth but with missing thread. You make a note. Border interruption and possible intentional removal. Potential mourning signal or personal code. Farid frowns. Why unweave instead of adding something? You shrug. Sometimes absence speaks louder. You flip the rug, inspecting the back. The weft is thick, clearly beaten hard during weaving. Whoever made this had strong wrists and no patience for daintiness. This rug wasn't made for showing off, it was made to be useful. Possibly sat on, eaten over, spilled on. The kind of rug that remembers soup more than ceremony. But there, along the edge of the reverse side, stitched in a different hand, are 3 initials in Persian script. S-M-Z-S-M-Z. Farid squints. A name? You nod. All 3 of them. You write, initials stitched, in reverse hem, S-M-Z. Likely owners or recipients. Thread colour slightly newer than rug, added post-weave. You look again at the botte motifs. Most are uniform, but one, just left of centre, is different. It's mirrored, curled in the opposite direction. Like a dancer turning the wrong way in a chorus line, you almost miss it. But now that you've seen it, it glares at you, bold and subtle all at once. You grin. Historians still argue whether such mirrored motifs were intentional symbols, opposites, twins, reversals, or simply mistakes allowed to pass. But you know this rug was woven by someone who didn't make careless mistakes. You jot. 1 mirrored botte motif, placement central. Possible symbolic inversion, intent likely. You sit back. The rug speaks not with poetry but with blunt truth. It is the kind of object people live with, not admire. It was made to survive stains, tears, years. It's not trying to be beautiful, and yet it is, because it persisted. You re-roll the rug tightly, wrap it in a soft canvas, and tag it. Hamadan rep weave, domestic utility piece, field botte motifs.
Quant motifs contains mourning cut and mirrored symbol. Archive under living textiles. Farid picks up his tea. This one's not fancy. No, you say, tying the bundle closed, but it tells the truth. Outside, rain begins to tap softly on the arched windows, pattering over the stone like fingers, drumming a loom frame. You finish your tea. Cold again, you pretend not to notice. The next rug is wrapped in faded violet silk, with a broken seal and no tag. A mystery then, you smile to yourself. These are your favourites. The faded violet silk wrap is soft in your hands, aged to a dusky lavender and smelling faintly of cedar, saffron, and something more elusive, perhaps rose oil long since dried into memory. The seal on the front is broken, a jagged wax crescent half smudged into the fabric. Whatever this rug once was, a gift, a relic, a treasure, it has now slipped loose from formal records. No tag, no date.
No origin. You love this part. You open the silk gently, as though lifting the edge of a dream someone forgot to finish. Inside is a rug unlike anything you've seen this week. It's small, maybe a prayer rug, maybe a cradle mat, but the proportions are odd, not rectangular, not square, closer to a pointed arch. The top narrows just slightly, forming a gentle curve like the dome of a mihrab. Already it speaks to intention. You roll it open slowly across the bench, and a strange hush seems to settle in the room around you. The rug is dark, not from dirt, no, it's clean, but from palette. Deep, nearly black blues and greens with subtle gold threads worked sparingly through the borders. At first, it looks like there's no pattern at all, just murky space. But then the light hits it differently and the design begins to whisper. A single tree, stylized and slender, grows up the center, not with symmetrical branches, but crooked ones, like it reached for light that was never even. The trunk is marked with a zigzag of gold threads that seem to pulse when you shift your gaze. Farid appears beside you, silent, sipping from a tiny glass of apple tea. "That's not a garden tree," he murmurs. You nod. "That's a cypress." And not just any cypress, the kind associated with mourning, eternity, and perseverance in Persian poetry. The kind that appears in tomb reliefs and ghazals. Upright, bending but never broken. You jot in your book. Unusual arched textile. Cypress tree motif, narrowed mihrab shape suggests devotional or funerary use. Gold thread sparing, precise. The border is minimalist, just 2 bands of weaving, one in soft olive, the other in a muted garnet red. No floral vines, no tendrils, no birds, only a small glyph in the upper left corner, stitched in pale silk. You lean in. It's not a name, it's a phrase. Subakun, be patient. Just that. Nothing more. You pause, pen in hand. Historians still argue whether textiles like this were woven as private meditations, as burial shrouds, or as gifts to those facing long illness or exile. There are records from Shiraz of weavers creating one-off prayer mats for soldiers leaving home, quiet blessings woven into cloth. This could be one of those. You write carefully. Inscription. Be patient. Suggests intention of emotional support, spiritual resilience. Possible gift for exile or parting. You flip the rug over, hands moving with more care than usual. The back is tightly knotted, silk warp, fine wool weft, high quality. And at the very center, under the tree's base, you find it, a knot that's been tied in a different material. Horsehair, black, shiny, coarse, just one. You sit back, exhale slowly. That is not decorative. You scribble. Single black horsehair, not beneath cypress root. Symbolic insertion, potential link to mourning or protective charm. Farid doesn't say anything. He just places your forgotten tea back beside you. You take a sip. It's still warm. You glance at the rug again and feel something odd. Not a shiver, not fear, but the weight of presence. This rug carried something. Grief, yes, but also strength. Quiet, unspoken resolve. You re-roll it with the violet silk, slower than usual. As you reach the inscription corner, you pause and run your finger over the pale words. Be patient. You smile, just slightly. All right. You write the final tag by hand. Mihrab forms silk prayer textile. Central cypress, sparse gold thread. Embroidered, be patient. Contains symbolic horsehair knot. Archive under, devotional, personal resilience. You store it in the velvet-lined drawer, reserved for items with no twin. Farid doesn't ask what you'll inspect next. He just sets down a wrapped parcel with an uneven shape and a frayed corner peeking out. You glance at the tag, unknown weave, unknown region, possibly unfinished. Your favorite, 2 words. You flex your fingers, lift the edge, and begin again. You press your fingers to the fabric of the next parcel, rough muslin, fraying along the folds, stitched closed with a single, thick thread, like someone meant to seal it forever and then changed their mind. The tag is simple, unknown weave, unknown region, possibly unfinished, possibly, but unlikely. You know better than to believe in unfinished rugs. More often they are paused or repurposed or abandoned by circumstance. But they always began with intent. You tug the thread free and let the bundle loosen. It slides open unevenly, and what emerges is a rug, or rather, the suggestion of one. A fragment, perhaps, or an experiment. It's large in dimension, but inconsistent. One side is smooth and taut, edges hemmed cleanly. The other side frays out in tufts, like a story stopped mid-sentence. The colors are earthy, ochre, sand, deep smoke. But there are accents, sharp blues, a flicker of white, even a thread of pink. These hues don't form a cohesive pattern. They swirl, they build into something, then vanish. There are rows of precise knots, then areas where the weaver changed course entirely, switching to flat weave, then looping, then back to pile. It is chaos, it is daring, it is alive. You feel the grin tugging at the corners of your mouth as you reach for your notebook. Hybrid textile, mixed construction, pile, flat weave, looped technique, inconsistent structure, color shifts abrupt, likely exploratory or practice panel. Farid walks by, glances at your bench and does a double take. That's a rug? You nod. Or a thesis? You count the knot density, impossible. It changes by the foot. One section boasts a delicate 80 knots per inch, then suddenly drops to 20. You've never seen anything like it. You flip it gently. The back confirms your suspicion. This is a teaching rug. You've read about them, but rarely seen one intact. Used in small schools or family workshops, these were practice fields, woven by apprentices learning multiple techniques at once. Here, on this same piece, are 3 types of knots: asymmetrical Persian, symmetrical Turkish, and even a rudimentary Spanish knot, a style long extinct in this region. Someone wasn't just teaching, they were testing. You jot furiously. Training textile, multi-knot sampler, presence of regional and foreign techniques, educational function likely. You inspect further, hands moving across the irregular surface. There are faint chalk lines in one corner, guidelines now barely visible. Along the border you find a stitched note, not in Persian, not in Arabic, Armenian. You pause. You recognize just enough of the script to make out 2 words, Virgin Hatvatsa, in the last section. You sit back slowly. So it was meant to end, it just never did. Maybe the apprentice left, maybe the teacher passed, maybe the loom broke, or maybe, like so many things made in places too small for archives, it simply slipped out of history's grasp. You write, embroidered Armenian phrase, the last section confirms planned conclusion, textile abandoned or preserved mid-process. Farid leans in again. Is it valuable? You smile. Not in money. He nods. That's enough. You find a patch of weaving near the center, tight, precise, uncharacteristically formal compared to the rest. It's a classic Herries motif, rendered in a style that shows care, calculation. This is where the weaver stopped practicing and started performing. You imagine the moment, young hands gripping the shuttle, eyes focused, ears tuned to the teacher's voice just out of frame. The hum of the room, the rustle of wool, the creak of the loom, and the breath held at the first perfect row. You reach the unfinished edge again. It unravels a little more each time you touch it. You consider whether to stabilize it, but decide against it. The unraveling is part of the story. You wrap the textile in a soft wool sleeve and label it. Multi-style training textile, hybrid knot forms, Armenian annotation, unfinished by design or circumstance. Recommend preservation in pedagogy collection. You place it in the archive drawer reserved for teaching tools and experiments. It doesn't belong in a case. It belongs near hands, near students. You glance back once before closing the drawer. Even incomplete, it spoke clearly. Outside, thunder rolls low across the city. Rain taps on the shutters, insistent now, like fingers drumming a worry. Farid brings 2 cups of hot tea, mint this time, no sugar, and places one beside you without speaking. You lift the next bundle, soft, narrow, wrapped in indigo-dyed linen. The tag reads only, Yazd, unusual edge finish. You sigh, sip your tea, and open the cloth. The indigo linen feels cool under your palms, damp around the edges. Rain must have crept in through the storeroom shutters again. You unfold it carefully, easing out the next rug like coaxing a story from an old friend who forgot how much she loved telling it. The tag had said, Yazd, unusual edge finish. You squint as the rug comes into view. Yazd weavers are meticulous, city-trained. Their rugs are symmetrical, meditative, detailed like manuscripts, borders that stack like architectural cornices, medallions so crisp you'd think they were printed. But this piece winks at all that and walks away barefoot. The field is calm, sandy beige with blush undertones. A scrolling vine stretches across it, lazily winding between small rosettes. The pattern isn't symmetrical, but it doesn't feel wrong. It's as if the weaver had memorized the general path of a vine and decided to follow it organically, not geometrically. And then you reach the edge, you tilt your head, you blink. It is ruffled, not straight, not bound in the traditional whip-stitched selvage. Instead, it has been gathered like pleats on a skirt, the edge subtly flaring outward in soft ripples. It doesn't lie flat, it floats. You reach underneath and find the technique. A strip of warp intentionally left loose during weaving, then cinched afterward with a tension stitch that contracts the length but expands the edge. You murmur aloud, it's ruched. Farid, appearing as if summoned by the phrase, raises an eyebrow. Did someone wear this rug? You smile. Maybe not wear, but someone definitely dressed it. You jot. Yazd rug, hand-pleated selvage, edge tension gathered post-weave. Rare finish, possibly ceremonial or theatrical application. Historians still argue whether ruched edges in textiles were a decorative flourish or a signal, perhaps used in dowry pieces or for specific domestic rituals. Some claim they were woven for bridal footpaths, laid beneath a bride as she walked into her new home. The edges would flutter slightly as she stepped, almost like the rug was exhaling. You trace the ripples again. There's a delicacy here that's far from typical Yazd rigidity. Even the design, those rambling vines, feels like someone let go of symmetry on purpose. You flip the rug. The back confirms what your fingers already suspected. Silk weft, not common in Yazd. Someone spared no expense for this. In the lower left corner, you find a hidden thread, a pale blue one woven into the fringe. Only one. All the others are undyed. You mark it quickly. Single blue thread in fringe. Placement suggests symbolic code or identifier. Farid crouches beside you. You think it was made for someone? You nod. Or by someone who couldn't say something out loud. You notice something else. The central vine curls unusually near the top. It loops into a tight spiral, then abruptly ends. No leaf. No flower. Just a halt. You've seen that before in mourning embroidery, where a motif is deliberately arrested to mark loss. The spiral is often used to represent a soul's journey. This one feels unfinished, but quietly so. You write, vine termination motif at field top. Suggests intentional cessation, possibly symbolic of departure or bereavement. You sit back and breathe in. The rug smells faintly of jasmine, not strong. Faint. The kind that clings to stored things. You wonder what room it once lay in, what feet passed over it, what whispers it absorbed. You re-roll it gently, tucking the ruffled edge inside first so it won't crush under weight. You bind it in cotton wrap and attach a label. Yazd city weave, rare ruched selvage, silk weft, floral field with vine termination and single blue fringe thread. Archive under domestic rights and transitions. Farid doesn't say anything this time, just offers you a dried fig and leaves you to the next. You sit for a moment before reaching for the next bundle, larger, heavy, the cloth coarse and flecked with straw. The tag simply reads, Qashqai, saddlebag, disassembled. You smile. Now we're travelling. You lift the coarse bundle onto your lap, straw flecks drifting off like dried petals. It smells of lanolin, sun, and animal. Real animal, not the romantic kind. This textile once knew dust, hoof, and motion. Qashqai, saddlebag, disassembled, the tag had said. You already know what to expect. Sort of. You untie the corners. The fabric peels back stiffly and two panels fall into your hands. Sister pieces once joined by a woven bridge, now separated. They're mirror opposites, fraternal twins, similar in structure, different in personality. Each panel is about the size of a small child's blanket. Squarish, flat, firm. You lay them side by side on the bench and already see the story forming. The Qashqai wove saddlebags not as decoration, but as life gear. Carried on donkeys or horses stuffed with tools, grain, or wool. They didn't weave for museums, they wove to move. You trace your fingers along the first panel. It's densely woven in a classic diamond lattice. Crimson and navy dominate, with orange accents and white relief lines. The wool is coarse but tightly packed. A kilim-style flat weave, with pile in select geometric areas, a technique designed to reduce wear while keeping beauty where the eye lingers. You jot, Qashqai half saddlebag, face. Mixed flat weave with tufted motifs. Lattice diamonds. Colors, crimson, navy, orange, white. High utility function. Then the second panel, the back. Completely flat, no pile, coarser wool. The design is simpler, horizontal bands in brown and rust. Practical. Meant to sit against the animal, not the eye. Historians still argue whether back panels were rushed through or deliberately plain. Some think the lack of motif represents humility. Others argue it was simply about time. Energy was spent where it mattered, the front. But this back panel isn't just simple, it's repaired. You notice it immediately, a long vertical strip where the original warp snapped and had to be retied, mid-weave. The tension changes, the stripes ripple, but the weaver kept going. You write, back panel shows repair in progress. Mid-weave warp replacement visible. Structural continuity maintained. Evidence of field repair. Farid leans on the edge of the bench, nibbling a pistachio. You think it made the full migration circuit? You nod, at least once, maybe more. He reaches down and gently flips over the front panel. On the reverse side, near the edge, is a line of knots in contrasting color. Bright turquoise, 10 of them, then nothing. You frown, you count again, 10, but they don't line up with any motif. They're purely structural. You write, 10 turquoise tail knots along interior hem, function unclear, possibly counting or ownership marker. You've heard of Qashqai women encoding stories in knot counts. 1 knot for every family member, a knot removed after a death. 10 could be a name, a year, a sorrow. Farid points to a dark mark near the middle. What's that? You sniff it, rub it, oil, you nod. Saddle rub. This wasn't just woven for the idea of use, it was used for years. You can feel the history ground into it, the texture moulded by weather and necessity. You reach for a fresh sheet in your logbook and begin a more formal description. Qashqai saddlebag, disassembled. Flat weave plus pile front panel with diamond lattice. Plain reverse. Warp repair suggests mid-journey restoration. Contains 10 turquoise interior tail knots. Evidence of oil transfer from saddle. Archive under nomadic functionals. You roll the pieces together, nestling the front against the back, just as they once were. But as you lift the panels to wrap them, something crinkles from inside the weave. You freeze. There's paper. Not modern, handmade, cracked at the edges. You very, very carefully extract it from between the front panel layers. A tiny envelope, folded twice, written in Persian script. Brai Zahra, for Zahra. You and Farid both go still. Inside is a dried flower, barely more than a shadow. Flattened, brittle, a small clover. You stare at it, no signature, no explanation, just the memory of someone thinking enough to tuck a message into a rug before it was packed and carried away. Farid's voice is quiet now. Do we log it? You nod, whispering. Everything matters. You wrap the 2 panels again, gently, reverently. The note and flower you slide into a protective sleeve, tagged and labelled, then archived alongside the rug, never apart. You tag the rug bundle. Qashqai nomadic saddlebag includes embedded note for Zara and dried clover, function confirmed by wear and repairs. Emotional artifact. Farid doesn't speak, neither do you. Some things don't need words. Outside, the storm has passed. The light turns golden against the shutters. You pick up the next bundle. It's long, narrow, and wrapped in faded green velvet. The tag says, Khorasan Prayer Runner, unusual wear pattern. You breathe in once and begin again. You lift the green velvet bundle, noticing how the fabric holds the warmth of the last light. It's heavier than expected, not bulky but dense, like a thought you've carried all day. The tag reads, Khorasan Prayer Runner, unusual wear pattern. You undo the velvet carefully. It falls away in thick folds, revealing the edge of the runner already frayed, already whispering of footsteps and repetition. You unroll it slowly. This is no palace rug. It is quiet, worn, narrow, a corridor piece. A namazlik, maybe, a rug that saw more knees than eyes. The field is simple, a soft faded brown, once perhaps a deeper saffron or clay. The design, such as it is subtle, a pointed mihrab at one end, outlined with fine white lines. No dramatic medallions, no floral distractions, just a path, a direction. And then you see it, the wear. Not in the center, as you'd expect from prostration, but to the left, a soft, oval dip, as if someone had always leaned slightly off-center when they prayed. Day after day, month after month, a gentle lean into memory, or grief, or habit. You frown, run your hand along the dip. It's not a warp floor, not water damage. This is where, born of devotion, of a body doing the same thing for years. You jot, Khorasan Runner, single mihrab with offset wear pattern, suggests repeated asymmetric prayer, trick prayer position, potential physical or emotional cause. Farid appears beside you, carrying 2 figs and a damp cloth. He sees the rug and doesn't speak immediately. Then, someone leaned left. You nod. Every time, he sits. Stroke? Injury? Maybe, you say. Or maybe just heartbreak. He hands you 1 fig. Either way, they kept going. You flip the rug to inspect the back. The knotting is fine, not luxurious, but careful. Around 60 knots per square inch. The edges are bound in narrow blue wool, faded now but still clinging to dignity. And there, along the top edge, stitched in near-invisible red thread, is a single phrase. Khadayam pra-bibaksh. God, forgive me. You stop breathing for a moment. It's not a quote, not a verse. It's a whisper, a murmur into cloth. You record it. Backstitch, embroidery in red. God, forgive me. Personal, possibly devotional inscription. Not standard liturgical reference. Historians still argue whether these phrases were added by weavers or users. Some say they were part of the spiritual labor, woven like prayers. Others argue they were sewn later by owners, making the rug a confessional. Either way, the intimacy is palpable. You sit back and take in the full length of it. The rug is worn not just in one place, but in a rhythm. There's a second patch of smoothness farther down, less defined, as if someone else later picked up the habit. Or maybe prayed beside the original user. A child, perhaps. You jot. Secondary wear patch suggests shared use, generational or familial continuity possible. Farid leans over your shoulder. Could have been a father and son? You nod. Or a widow and daughter. The runner has no fringe, unusual for Khorasan pieces, but not unheard of. You check the ends, cleanly trimmed, then turned under and whip-stitched tight. You've seen this in travel rugs where fringe would tangle or catch. You write, ends turned under and stitched, likely travel or compact use design, reinforces daily function over display. You look at the rug again and feel its quiet resistance. It's not trying to impress. It just is. Like a stone path between trees, you don't notice it until you realize how often it's carried you. You fold it with care, aligning the mihrab crease with the stitched phrase. You wrap it in a clean cotton sleeve and tie it with unbleached twine. Then you tag it. Khorasan Prayer Runner, offset wear, suggests asymmetric body habit. Embroidered, God, forgive me. Secondary usage pattern, archive under, private devotion. Farid's voice is low now. I'd pray on that. You nod. So did someone. Outside the wind has dropped. The world has turned soft again. You turn back to the bench. Waiting for you is a small parcel wrapped in reed paper, tied not with string but with a strip of reed matting. The tag, barely legible. Luristan, child's weaving. You exhale slowly. Time to listen with a gentler ear. The reed paper crackles like old firewood as you unfold it. Its fibers catch on your sleeves, snagging with a persistence that feels strangely appropriate for what lies inside. A small, oddly shaped textile, no longer than your forearm and not much wider. The tag had barely survived. Luristan, child's weaving? You lift the piece gently. It's uneven, frayed at both ends and entirely crooked. The edges wobble like a wandering river, the weft tension so inconsistent that parts of it bow outward in gentle bubbles, and yet your breath catches a little. It's not clumsy, it's earnest. The colours are bright but simple, bands of cherry red, dusty yellow and blue-grey arranged without precision. The blue band cuts off halfway through the piece, replaced suddenly by a row of off-white. There's no logic to this switch, just a change. A child's decision, maybe, or a weaver short on thread. You lower your eyes and lean in closer. The knots are large, sparse, and clumsy in places, but in others, oddly tight, like someone found their rhythm for a few glorious minutes. You smile. Farid comes up behind you. Looks like someone gave up halfway? You shake your head. I don't think they gave up, I think they finished. He raises an eyebrow. That's finished. You nod, not by our standards, but by theirs. Maybe this was exactly what they meant it to be. You jot. Luristan fragment, small-scale textile. Irregular weave, colour bands incomplete. Knotting suggests beginner weaver, possibly a child. Woven intent clear despite asymmetry. Historians still argue whether these small, irregular pieces were practice rugs or just playful side projects. In some nomadic traditions, children wove alongside their parents, using leftover wool to imitate the motions, to learn not just with their hands but with their eyes. You flip the piece over and spot something remarkable. A tiny pattern, repeated just twice, nestled in the red band, a rhombus, a crooked one, but recognizable. You trace it gently with your finger. Someone tried a motif. You whisper, you make another note. 2 repeated rhombus motifs, slightly misaligned. Evidence of early pattern attempt. Suggests learning process in situ. Farid brings 2 bowls of pistachios and sits beside you. You think it was a child? You shrug. Could have been a novice. Could have been someone weaving just once in their life. He nods slowly. Like someone writing a poem, just one, and never again. You smile. Exactly. Then you notice something else, faint but unmistakable. In the corner, near the edge, the wool is twisted in a way that doesn't serve the structure, almost like someone tied a knot for fun, or to mark something. You lean in closer. There are 3 little knots, spaced an inch apart. Not structural, decorative, a flourish. You jot. 3 knotted tufts on outer edge, non-functional, likely personal signature or playful addition. It's hard to explain how these tiny gestures, misaligned patterns, sudden colour shifts, playful knots, feel alive, as if someone left fingerprints not just on the wool, but in the rhythm of the weave itself. This rug doesn't look important, but it feels essential. You wrap it in soft muslin, twice over, and tag it by hand. Luristan learner's weave, small, asymmetric. Colour bands, basic motif attempts. Contains edge knot embellishment. Archive under kitty first hands. You pause, then add another line. Not a mistake, a beginning. Farid watches you tuck it into a small drawer lined with linen. You're getting sentimental. You shrug. I like first drafts. You sip the rest of your tea. Cold again, as always, but it fits. The next rug is already on your bench, wrapped in pale silk. Its tag elegant and precise. Kerman, garden design, faded. You let out a breath. Time to visit paradise. You draw the pale silk wrap aside like the curtain of a forgotten theatre, and the garden unfolds slowly beneath your fingers. Kerman, garden design. Faded, the tag had said. But faded doesn't mean lifeless. Not here. You've seen many Kerman rugs, floral explosions, medallions within medallions, busy with vines and pomegranates and carnations stacked like stories. But this one breathes. The colours are pale, yes, ghosts of what they once were. The reds have mellowed into blush, the blues into mist, the greens nearly gone, but the structure remains. A formal garden stylized into quadrants. 4 corners, 4 seasons, 4 imagined fountains, all pointing toward a single axis. A now faint tree of life rising from the centre, splitting upward into feathery branches and branching dreams. This is the Shaharbagh design. 4 gardens, not just decorative, a cosmological vision. Paradise laid flat in wool. You lean in. There are nightingales, 2 of them, nestled in the lower quadrant, wings tucked as if asleep. You barely see them at first. The detail has worn soft, but the shapes remain. You smile. They didn't leave. Farid, already sipping from a mug of rosewater tea, peers over. This one looks like it remembers something. You nod. It remembers everything. You jot in your notebook. Kerman garden rug, Shaharbagh design, central tree of life, 4 quadrants with faded seasonal motifs. 2 nightingales in lower field, significant age-related fading, but compositional integrity intact. The wear isn't random. You run your hand along the border. It's smooth in the upper left, rougher in the bottom right. That tells you something. This rug was laid in a room with sunlight falling at an angle, day after day, for decades. The left edge faded more. The right edge absorbed more footsteps. You write, differential fading indicates environmental exposure. Possible south-facing window alignment. Suggests long-term static placement in domestic setting. Historians still argue whether the Shaharbagh design was meant to represent a literal garden or a metaphysical one. Some see it as the Islamic interpretation of paradise, an eternal orchard. Others suggest it was just a beloved layout, familiar to everyone from court architects to carpet weavers. You trace the outline of one quadrant. Inside it, pomegranates, their outlines barely distinguishable from the vines curling around them. You count 7, 2 missing stems, 5 intact. Pomegranates meant fertility, wisdom, eternal life. You write, lower left quadrant contains 7 pomegranate motifs, 2 partial, symbolic resonance with fertility and abundance themes. Then in the upper right quadrant you see something unusual, a tree, twisted, different from the others. Its leaves are sharper, its trunk thinner, a cypress perhaps, no, too jagged. Then you spot the branch tipped not with a leaf but a tiny woven crescent. You blink, a moon, no, a sickle. And then you understand it's not just a tree, it's a fig tree pruned. You scribble quickly, upper right quadrant tree variant, interpreted as fig tree with pruning motif, sickle tip. Symbolism may indicate seasonal labour, spiritual preparation, or decline. Farid squints. So even paradise needs trimming. You nod. Especially paradise. You flip the rug slowly to inspect the back. The knots are fine. Silk-wool blend, around 100 knots per inch. It would have been dazzling once. But the colours have surrendered gently over time, as if the rug agreed to grow older. In the topmost edge of the reverse, you spot something you didn't expect. A name, stitched faintly in gold thread, Marjan. You whisper it aloud. It hums like the rug itself. You jot. Name stitched in gold thread on reverse hem, Marjan. May indicate weaver or owner. Placement suggests personal attachment. The signature is shy, almost an afterthought, but deliberate. A weaver marking her creation, or perhaps a gift meant for Marjan. A wedding, a farewell, a prayer. You roll the rug halfway and pause, looking again at the central tree. You hadn't noticed before, but near its base, woven discreetly in faded green, is a small shape, a water channel, splitting off and curling toward the edge. That's rare. You write, visible water channel motif at tree base, curling toward field edge. Represents irrigation, flow, or divine nourishment. You sit back, wrap the rug in silk again more slowly than before. You've never met Marjan, but now she feels like someone you once knew. You tag the bundle, Kerman garden rug, faded Chahar bag layout, tree of life with water motif, nightingales, pomegranates, fig with pruning icon, signed Marjan. Archive under, Paradise Designs, personalized. Farid sets a small rose beside it. You don't ask where he found it. You just leave it there. Outside, the silence has settled again, and the next bundle is already waiting. Square, heavy, bound in what looks like burlap. The tag? Kurdish origin, extremely dense weave.
Unknown purpose. You roll your shoulders. Time to meet something stubborn. You run your hands over the burlap wrapping. It's coarse, scratchy, stained with something that might be tea or tobacco or time. The knot holding it closed is tight. Not the delicate kind tied for ceremonial bundles, but the stubborn knot of a shepherd who's too busy to care what the archivist thinks, and the tag had read, Kurdish origin, extremely dense weave, unknown purpose. You smile. That's a polite way of saying, we don't know what to do with this thing. You loosen the knot and the rug rolls out with an audible thud. No exaggeration, it lands on the bench like a loaf of dense bread. Square, solid, small, maybe a meter across, but impossibly weighty. When you try to lift one edge, it resists. You grunt and flip it over like a stubborn dog who doesn't want to go for a walk. This is not a decorative piece. The surface is rough, short pile, nearly bristled, made of goat hair or coarse tribal wool.
The color is muddy brown, interwoven with flecks of rust, soot, and something vaguely green. There's no central motif, no medallion, no border, just density. You press your thumb into it. The fabric barely yields. The knots are packed so tightly that light struggles to pass between them. You count. Density, approximately 300 knots per square inch, unusually compact for tribal origin. You blink. That's absurd. That's miniature painting level precision, but there's no visual payoff, no design. So why the effort? You jot in your book. Square Kurdish textile, unadorned, monochrome, extreme knot density. Material suggests high resilience function. Farid arrives just in time to poke at it with a chopstick. What is it? A shield? You shrug. Could be. You inspect the back. There's a double-layered warp, an unusual structural choice. One layer of wool, one of cotton. This added stiffness must have been intentional. But again, why? Historians still argue whether pieces like this were made for sitting, kneeling, saddling, or storing. You've heard theories that some were saddle seat covers used to soften the ride and distribute weight evenly. Others suggest they were portable altar cloths meant to endure years of use on rocky terrain. You check the corners. 2 of them have leather loops stitched in. That's your clue. You write, leather corner loops suggest attachment function. Possible saddle or pack stabilizer, supports utilitarian use over decorative. Then a surprise, you flip one edge and discover a stitched seam, very small, very precise. You tug gently and a pocket opens. A rug with a pocket. Inside a folded scrap of parchment, stiff with age. You hold your breath as you open it. There's a symbol, a simple geometric glyph drawn in ink. A diamond inside a square with 2 lines extending from its base like legs. Farid peers over your shoulder. Looks like a birdhouse. You laugh softly. Or a trap. You jot. Hidden in a pocket with parchment. Contains geometric glyph. Diamond within square. Twin vertical lines. Purpose unknown. Potential tribal marking or protection sigil. You tuck the parchment back inside. Whatever it meant, someone hid it there for a reason. Maybe it was a blessing, maybe a warning, or maybe just a scrap of memory. You examine the surface again. Something's odd. There's a faint ridge, a contour, running diagonally across the rug, from corner to corner, not a flaw, a deliberate shape. You trace it and realize the knots are shorter on one side. The rug is subtly angled, like a wedge. Your eyes widen. This wasn't a sitting mat. It was a load stabilizer, wedged under cargo or under a rider to even out the slope of a lopsided mount. You scribble furiously, Diagonal contour suggests load balancing function, possible saddle tilt compensator or pack wedge. Explains asymmetrical compression pattern. Farid lifts it and grunts. Yep, definitely not for decoration. You tag it with a grin. Kurdish utility textile. Extreme knot density. Hidden parchment with symbol. Leather attachment loops. Angled contour suggests pack wedge use. Archive under. Adaptive functional textiles. You roll it tight and bind it with jute cord. The same kind it probably travelled with a century ago. As you place it in its bin, the parchment's image flashes in your mind again. That diamond in the square. Maybe it was a maker's mark. Maybe it was a kind of compass. Either way, it pointed somewhere. You sit back and exhale. The next bundle is unusually flat, wrapped in delicate white gauze, sealed with lacquered thread. The tag is crisp, formal, and unusual. Safavid fragment, silk tapestry, eyes only. You feel your pulse change. This one is sacred. You pause before unwrapping the next bundle. The white gauze glows faintly in the afternoon light, like mist catching on sunlight, too delicate to be trusted with fingers. The seal is red lacquer, cracked at the edge, stamped with a small floral medallion, a tulip perhaps, or a lotus. The tag had whispered its warning. Safavid fragment, silk tapestry, eyes only. You understand the message. Some things are not meant to be touched more than once. You slip a linen cloth over your hands and begin the slow, careful undoing. The gauze gives with a whisper, and the tapestry unfurls like a sigh from another world. It doesn't unroll so much as float, its silk threads barely anchored to weight or time. It's a fragment. Only a portion remains, perhaps a third of its original size, torn, not trimmed. The edges curl like burnt paper, the threads singing of separation. But what's left is breathtaking. The background is the deepest lapis, darkened with age to something almost purple. Against it, a scene plays out. A garden, yes, but not like the structured chaharbag of the Kerman rug. This garden is alive. Birds flit mid-flight, stitched mid-wing beat, with feathers so fine they could be mistaken for brushstrokes. Vines curl naturally, not symmetrically. Each leaf slightly different, like it was observed rather than imagined. You see a rabbit peeking from under a rosebush, a pheasant mid-leap, a lion, half-faded, napping beneath a cypress. You write, slowly. Safavid silk tapestry fragment, garden tableau, lapis field, naturalistic flora and fauna, bird, rabbit, lion, exceptional needle density. Design suggests royal or commissioned origin. Farid doesn't even speak. He just stands behind you, reverent, as if you're both at prayer. You reach for your loop and lean in. The thread count is staggering. Over 400 knots per inch, silk on silk. You've only seen that kind of work in museum vaults. You glance at the colour work. There's shading within the petals. Some roses have 7 tones from base to tip. Someone dyed this silk in the same way painters mix oils. You jot, silk on silk weave, thread painting technique observed, up to 7-tone gradations in floral motifs, comparable to miniature painting aesthetics. Then in the lower right corner your breath catches. There's a hand, just the fingers, open, reaching toward the lion. Feminine, ringless, palm slightly upward. A gesture, not of power, but of offering. But the wrist is cut off. The rest of the figure is missing, torn from history. You stare at it for a long time. Historians still argue whether Safavid tapestries like this were purely decorative or coded with political and poetic meaning. Some claim they were allegorical, queens as lions, lovers as birds. Others believe they were simply triumphs of art, exercises in craft for royal court audiences, but you know better than to think anything was simply decorative. You write, isolated hand motif, reaching gesture. No remaining figure. Possible allegorical representation, context lost due to fragmentary survival. Farid leans in and points at something you missed, a corner motif stitched in gold, It looks like a signature, but stylized. It's not Persian. You squint. It's a cartouche, a calligraphic frame.
Inside it, work of Najm al-Din, a named weaver. You exhale.
You exhale. Those are rare. You jot carefully. Woven cartouche, work of Najm al-Din, identifies master weaver. Placement confirms intentional authorship. Significance high. You sit back, overwhelmed. This was not just a fragment. It was once a masterpiece. And yet somehow the damage, the absence, the isolation of the hand, those are what make it real now. It's not just perfect silk. It's survival. It's loss you can touch. You lift it once more, let the light fall across the lion's mane, the pheasant's wing, the woman's reaching fingers. Then you fold it slowly, reverently, between layers of acid-free tissue and wrap the gauze around it again. You write the tag by hand in your neatest script. Safavid royal tapestry fragment, garden scene with fauna, isolated reaching hand, cartouche of Najm al-Din, fragmentary damage, archive under, courtly art, survivals. Handle by gloved touch only. Farid places it into the silk-lined drawer reserved for court pieces and closes it softly, as if sealing a tomb. You both exhale. Then he gestures to the shelf. The final bundle waits. It's long, narrow, wrapped in waxed canvas with twine bindings. The tag reads, Balochi belt weave, oral record encoding suspected. You blink. A rug that talks. You pull the final bundle close and run your hands over the waxed canvas. It's taut, waterproof, flecked with dust and time. The twine has been tied in a sailor's hitch. Secure, no frills. Someone meant for this to travel, not to be admired. The tag had said, Balochi belt weave, oral record encoding suspected. You untie it carefully, heart beating a little faster, not from excitement, but anticipation. The kind you feel when standing at the edge of something ancient, half-heard. Inside, rolled tightly, is a long, narrow strip of textile, not a rug, not a mat.
A belt, but wider than most, nearly the width of your palm and more than 6 feet long. It uncoils like a scroll. At first glance, it's simple. Geometric motifs in red, black, ivory and ochre, repeating diamonds, zigzags, tiny squares like teeth. And yet the rhythm isn't uniform. Some diamonds are paired, some stand alone. Some have 3 dots inside them, some are empty. Your eyes narrow. This isn't patterning, it's punctuation. You pick up your notebook and begin to sketch, not just the shapes, but their spacing. Every 4th band has a pause, a break. Some borders are doubled, some aren't. You've seen this before, mnemonic weaving. Farid watches silently as you trace the belt. Is it a map? You shake your head. A memory. You jot. Balochi belt weave. Geometric motifs in repeating intervals. Irregular spacing suggests non-aesthetic intention.
Pattern possibly linked to oral storytelling structure. Among some Baloch tribes, you remember, belts weren't just clothing, they were song aids worn by elders who recited lineages, ballads, or histories. Each shape marked a shift, a name, a death, a birth. The weave held the cue. You count again. 37 diamonds, 12 pairs, 3 diamonds with central dots. You write, motif, breakdown, 37 total diamonds, 12 pairs, 3 dotted. Intervals consistent with episodic oral recitation traditions, potential familial or tribal record. Historians still argue whether such belts encoded literal facts or abstract memory sequences, if a dotted diamond meant a death or a heroic deed or just a shift in mood. But all agree on one thing: they helped people remember. You run your hand along the edge, one spot catches. Tucked into the selvage is a small bead, blue glass, cracked in the center, a protection bead, an evil eye. You smile. You note it down. Embedded, blue protection bead, glass. Traditional talismanic insert. Implies belt was worn during performance or travel. The belt is sturdy, wool warp, camel hair or weft, not delicate, but made with care. You flip it and notice something curious on the reverse. A thread, looped through 5 motifs in a row, like someone marked those 5 lines in the story. Farid frowns. Could that be a song? You nod. Or a warning, or a prayer. You write, back-looped thread through 5 adjacent motifs may indicate marked stanzas, repeated section, or critical narrative episode. You've seen belts like this displayed in museums, hung flat, lifeless. But this one still holds voice. You wrap it around your wrist once, twice. It fits like it remembers a body. It smells of dust and ghee and something else. Campfire maybe, or sweat, or a storm that passed 20 years ago. You take one last note. Balochi mnemonic belt. Pattern as oral archive. Contains symbolic breaks, marked motifs, talismanic insert, not merely textile, functional memory device. You lay it flat, wrap it in raw linen, and place it in a shallow drawer lined with soft straw and cedar wood. The very last note in your register reads, filed under living texts. Farid doesn't say a word, neither do you. You sit back, the room around you, quiet, golden, with afternoon's slow retreat. The last rug stored, the last voice silenced for now. You sip the end of your tea, cold again, predictably. The archive breathes with you, still, content. And now the light is low, stretching long shadows across the floor, softening the air, quieting the walls. You set your notebook aside. Let your hands rest in your lap. The shelves around you stand full, tightly rolled, carefully labelled, whispering their own stories under wraps of silk and burlap and gauze. You've done well. You've listened. You've remembered. You breathe in. Slow, gentle. The dust in the air has settled. Even Farid across the room is motionless now, his cup empty, his eyes half closed. It's silent, not empty, just full in a different way. Your mind slows, following the threads of today's memories. Prayer runners worn soft by grief, garden tapestries faded like sighs, belts stitched with songs no one else remembers. Let them settle, let them curl around you like a blanket. There will always be more rugs, more fragments, more knots to count, but not now, not tonight. Tonight, you let the hush of hand-woven things lull you downward, into the soft hum of imagined looms, into the even rhythm of forgotten fingers tying one knot after another, after another, after another. No rush, no endings. Only the quiet satisfaction of a task completed, and a soft, steady fade into sleep.